We can suffer together, folks, if you want to pony up several $1,000s. I don't think they'll invite me back if they have anyone here listening to my pitch. Okay, maybe the rest. Oh. And the optional cruise up the Nile, I'll be there too. So it's 2 weeks of incredible fun. There'll be a come-as-you-were party on the 3rd night of the cruise. So enough poking fun at our colleagues at their expense. Finally, there is a book out. Those of you if you've ever wanted to buy a Terence McKenna book and have been frustrated because you didn't want to grow psychedelic mushrooms in your kitchen, which was the only other book around, you can now purchase this book. However, only in the Esalen bookstore, because it can't legally be sold till the 17th of February. So the Esalen bookstore made a special deal with Bantam and got a couple of cases of it for this weekend. So you could actually be the first person on your block. The title is Food of the Gods, not Why Eve Was Right, which is what I wanted, but you learn your place in the hierarchy of being when you work with Bantam books. But seriously, this is my best shot at making a rational argument, sort of, based on archaeology, history, and so forth, for the importance of psychedelics in culture and in the present situation, and for a need to rethink cultural and legal attitudes toward these things. So that's in the mix. And that's, I think I'll save the rest of this paper for tomorrow morning.
What happened to the Harper's book that is supposed to be released first?
Aha. Fans of internecine publishing struggles. What happened was the two publishers decided, some faster than others, that it would be better if the Bantam book came out first. So the Bantam book is out, and the question refers to a second book called The Archaic Revival, which will be out in May, and which will in no way duplicate this. They're completely different books, but there was a little jostling toward the finish line, and Harper's decided to let Bantam go first. After 20 years of being ignored, it was nice to see that these people were paying attention. So anyway, that's it for the gossip department. Welcome to Esalen, those of you who've never been here before. Welcome to the refurbished big house, fans of renovation who have been here before. And the best way these things work, I think, or what we've fallen into as a habit, is on this first meeting, people basically just state, if they wish to, who they are, but for my edification, what can I tell you? You know, what do you want? It's brief enough, and it will go past very quickly. So out of people stating their interests and concerns, tonight will come an agenda of topics for the rest of the weekend. And once I get going, my style is pretty much just to rave. So feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, it will just go past. And you can interrupt for clarification or to ask a question or whatever. It's very informal. It's so informal that I don't even know the name of it. Does anybody have a catalog?
A Weekend with Terence McKenna.
We finally just hurled all pretense to the wind rather than endlessly recycling Well, we can probably fill that bill. So to my mind, the importance of these things is that everybody is self-selected to be here. And it's an extraordinarily peculiar set of concerns that fall into nexus in this situation. So we represent some kind of an affinity group, and I think it's very important for the people to get to know each other, because all kinds of relationships, arrangements, possibilities can emerge out of these meetings. Someone in this room has what you're looking for, and your problem is to figure out who, and then go from there. So to aid you, the clues emerge tonight when we go around in the circle, and everybody gets a brief chance. And for some people, it will be probably their only opportunity, because some people step out of the light, to say anything you want, provided it's brief. Lack of brevity is proof of psychosis in this situation. And after all, we are in a center for psychophysical healing, so please honor that. My take on science, I might as well couch it as a comment to you, but it will come out in some other form anyway, is science is excellent at doing what it was designed to do, but it has expanded its province into all reality and seeks to pass judgment in areas where it has no real business going. It's a very limited method that achieves its claim to universality by wildly exaggerating its accomplishments. For example, science to do its work, modern science, post-Newton, depends on probability theory. But probability theory has a built-in assumption that has never been thoroughly looked at, and that is the assumption of what Newton called pure duration, meaning that science, if you describe a scientific procedure to someone, they don't ask whether you did it on a Wednesday or a Saturday. Science seeks to be time independent. And in order to do that, it has to make the assumption that time is invariant. This is just a first try with Occam's razor. In fact, in our own lives, what we experience is endless variation. In other words, it may be that the hydrogen bond, when it breaks, always breaks the same way. But love affairs, investment strategies, political campaigns, the building of empires, these things are always characterized by a kind of uniqueness. And science, by invading these domains with probabilistic conceptions, gives us the science of statistics, polling, and hands to us mythical entities like the citizen or the average white male, or these are just absurd abstractions that are generated by a particular kind of worldview that is not really examining its first premises. So I would propose a modified definition of science that would then let it do its work in peace, which is science is the study of those phenomena which are time independent, but that in many realms of nature, a new theory to replace probability theory and flat duration is necessary. The power of probability is simply based on its success in these very, very limited domains. And now there's no way back from that. Modern science is thoroughgoingly probabilistic. If you were to try and remake, I mean, they're always raving about the new paradigm in science, and it's always usually some tiny diddling of what they've already got. If you were to really try and remake science, then you would have to replace the assumption of variability in time with a mathematical statement about its variability. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow, because there is room for that. I mean, science is not reason. Reason is a different domain, and I think anything which is unreasonable, ultimately unreasonable, is just patently absurd. That's why I don't feel great affinity with most of the marching hordes of the New Age, because, you know, the fact of the matter is they don't possess any razors for separating the nuts from the berries. But nevertheless, our intellectual choices are not between the channelers of Lazarus and the American scientific establishment. There's a vast set of possibilities in between there and beyond those poles of discourse that can be worked out. Every society that's always existed has had the built-in assumption that they only needed to find out 5% more about reality, and then it would all fall into place, and that they had the right tools for doing that. And but we look back then with this great sense of superiority on the naivete of the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, the Maya, the 17th century English, everybody. We look back on their naivete. But in fact, our own cultural enterprise is obviously fraught with a peculiar illogic and childishness and naivete. I mean, we're a culture that, robs our children to create a potlatch culture in the present. And this would look fairly pathological from any cultural perspective outside our own. The thing, I mean, this is a segue, but it makes sense. The thing that I think psychedelics do that addresses this problem and many, many problems, or choke points in our ideological effort to understand what's going on, is the contribution that they make is that they dissolve boundaries. And culture, I mean, the word virtual reality was used as we went around the circle. Culture is the sanctioned virtual reality, and it is put in place by the machinery of local language, you see. And so then you're born into this circumstance, and you're told, you are a male child, you are a citizen of the United States, you are a Christian, you are a Jew, you will go to college, you will do this, and you never question. It's called the social contract. It hasn't gone unnoticed by Western philosophers. It's gone unnoticed by those of us who are its foremost victims. They try to tell you that you're in a social contract, but when you ask to see your signature on the document, they tell you that you were born into this contract. Well, what the hell kind of contract is that? It means that you were born into a kind of enslavement to a linguistically empowered paradigm of virtual reality within which you will walk around your entire life, congratulating yourself on its accomplishments and ignoring its contradictions and weaknesses. So what psychedelics do, and why they are in all times and all places such social dynamite, is they dissolve the cultural machinery. Doesn't matter. Head-shrinking Amazon native, Hasidic Jew, Chinese merchant in Singapore, whoever it is, the psychedelic dissolves their cultural construct and puts them in touch with the fact of being in organism. Being an organism is like what you get when you take off your real clothing. Not this clothing, but the clothing of language, programming, and assumption. Then you find yourself within the context of organism, outside the context of culture. And for the reason this is not a mass movement is many people hear that and they say, I know what that is. That's called being nuts. I don't want that. That sounds absolutely terrifying. Well, these are people for whom that cultural machinery is necessary armoring in an almost Reichian sense. Necessary armoring. They cannot face the world without culture because they are in fact defined by culture. Now, who are these people? These are the people, and we each to some degree imbibe in this category. These are the people whose values are set by the engines of commerce and propaganda. These are the people who dress as they are told to dress, spend as they are told to spend, believe as they are told to believe. But within every human being, there is a kind of, at least the possibility of a revulsion against this kind of anesthesia of uniqueness, because that's what it is. You can put your uniqueness to sleep, and then you dress Gucci and you invest with these people and you drive this car and you know you're correct because your accountants, your managers, your agents, your public, whoever, your husband, your lover is telling you that you're correct. Definition from without means being defined by the cultural machinery. Cultures other than our own have somehow always known, perhaps because nature is such a huge force outside the Western industrial democracies, people have always known that this was a fiction, that the world of cultural values is a necessary illusion, if you will. And so they create a class of people called shamans, or seers, or magicians, or trans-ecstatics, or what have you. And these people are deputized by the cultural machinery to go beyond it. To go beyond it and to return with truth. Not culturally sanctioned truth, but just truth, the felt experience of being in organism that I'm talking about. And by this process, cultures conduct their evolution, if you're an evolutionary thinker, or their random walk through time, if you're more of a phenomenologist. But whatever they're doing, we're not doing that, because the mechanisms that we have used to close off access to the beyond culture dimension have in our hands grown so strong that we have, in a sense, succeeded to the point where we've put ourselves out of business. And the people to blame for this are these wily Greeks. Because while everybody else was carving horned masks and painting themselves with cross-hatching and stuff like that, the Greeks got the idea, we'll do it differently. We will portray the surface of the naked human body in marble. What this means is that the eye rises to the surface of reality and looks around for the first time from the point of view that we would call naive realism. But what a cultural journey it took to reach naive realism, because you had to sever yourself endlessly from the intuition of a symbolic, magical, spirit-haunted universe. And the Greeks, through a series of cultural accidents, and I would say mistakes, ultimately, achieved this. And they had then an alphabet, a phonetic alphabet, which empowered a further severing of linguistic intentionality from the essence of the object intended. Because you see, a phonetic alphabet symbolizes sound. It doesn't symbolize the way something looks or its thinghood. It just symbolizes sound. And the phonetic alphabet then issued into a series of cultural styles: science, rationalism, mathematical analysis of phenomenon. I mean, this was something absolutely unheard of, and is the unique contribution of the Western mind, that, you know, people noticed that you could take a gut string and shorten it by half, and the tone would shift 1 octave, and stuff like that. And they got the idea of numerical analysis, which opened up the path into culture to the present world. Well, each of these steps into realism, and remember I said we would call it naive realism. Now that word takes on a different meaning from the context of the 20th century. It was naive. It was horribly naive. In fact, we were led down the primrose path by such simplistic notions, because what was suppressed was the invisible, messy world of the spirit and the human unconscious. This is the great tension that illuminates Greek civilization. You know, on one, I mean, take Plato as an example, because here in one thinker, these distinct strains of thought, these antithetical strains of thought are perfectly present. You have, you know, an overarching realism, a drive to categorize and to arrange in rational relationships, and you have a thoroughgoing mysticism with roots back into the Minoan religion of Crete and back into Egypt and Africa. I mean, it's really extraordinary. And that was the last moment in the Western cultural enterprise when these things were in balance. And they were not in balance in any one particular person. If you lived in that world, you probably had to pick and choose. And, you know, the skeptics were sneering at the Gnostics, who were saying secret knowledge came from an unspeakable place beyond the machinery of cosmic fate. And the skeptics just thought, you know, baloney, what kind of talk is that? Now, we live in the consequences of this naive realism. Because like all forms of innocence, if allowed to grow beyond the proper bounds, it becomes festering, it becomes decadent, it becomes not innocence but idiocy. It turns on itself. And this is, I think, the kind of world that we're living in. Now, parallel to this, a cultural adventure of several thousand years, the rainforest peoples of the warm tropics of the world kept intact the high Paleolithic style of cultural relativism mitigated by natural magic. And what did natural magic mean? It meant these boundary-dissolving experiences with hallucinogens. Now, it isn't simply, I don't want to make it sound reductionist, it isn't simply that culture builds up structure and psychedelics dissolve structure and then conduct you into some shimmering existential realm of transcultural being. It isn't that. It's that in that shimmering transcultural realm of being, you discover new modalities, new rules. There's something there when you dissolve all the boundaries that you can. And the paradox of what is there, from the point of view of the legacy of rationalism, is what is there is an immense love and affection and intentionality waiting to engulf suffering mankind or the individual. This is what I call the mind behind nature, what people call Gaia, the mind of the planet, the organized intellecty that somehow is the mothering force that encloses the whole of planetary life. This is a real thing. And I would never have thought so had I not had experiences which forced me to consider this. I think without the experiences, that rap comes off as horribly namby-pamby. You know, I mean, it's just, oh my God, not another one of these Gaia people, you know. But, in fact, this is a fact of reality, which anyone who has the courage to make the proper investigations can satisfy themselves is a real object of experience. You see, I'm 45. I grew up through the 50s, and I can remember these movies where the white people get captured by the cannibals and put in the pot to be boiled, and there was always a witch doctor, right? Well, this guy just epitomized the most nightmarish forces of unbridled primitivism and ignorance imaginable. Now, this has become, or is in the act of becoming, I hope, the guiding paradigm of the culture. Because what the shaman is the person who is still, and it's men and women, the person who is still in touch with this organic intelligence that lies behind nature. Now, the puzzle behind all of this, I really don't think that there would be much of a problem if what we were dealing with was a planet with teeming oceans, teeming jungles, climaxed forests in the temperate and tropical zone, Arctic tundra, so forth and so on. The clue that something weird is going on this planet is ourselves, obviously. I mean, we are like a fart at the opera. Everything else makes sense. We don't make sense. And the speed with which the human type emerged from the proto-hominids is unparalleled in the evolutionary history of life. Edmund O. Wilson called the doubling of the human brain in size in under 3 million years the most rapid doubling of organ size in a major animal in the entire history of life on this planet. Us. There's something weird about human beings, and so much of the explanatory machinery of culture is designed to make it go away, you see. Even something as respectable and expressive of liberal values as Darwinism is in fact an effort to explain how it's all okay. It's natural. Don't worry. It's natural. You just get mutation and you have natural selection and you have traits and these traits extend themselves. But it's a great step, you know, to Milton to the space shuttle, to an integrated global economy. I mean, are these the products of animal existence? The Darwinist says yes. And we tend to huddle under his umbrella because, you know, these shit-slinging fundamentalists seem to be the only other people out there. But obviously, when you're impaled on the horns of that kind of a dilemma, there needs to be a breakthrough to a third, fourth, or fifth possibility. And what I will argue for this weekend is that something very, very peculiar adheres to the adventure of being human, and that it is not all business as usual. We are not simply an advanced chimpanzee. Neither are we the sons and daughters of the Lord God Almighty. I mean, that also seems to me a stretch and to raise certain problems not easily swept under the rug. There has to be a third possibility. And I think that when we start, as we will tomorrow, talking about the way psychedelics synergize and stabilize certain abilities within a hominid population, and the way in which then other cultural reinforcements can be built upon that, you will see at least part of the story has to do with the way in which, by being forced toward an omnivorous diet, by virtue of having to leave the canopy homeland for a bipedal existence in the grasslands, we had to undergo a huge dietary change. And part of our strangeness has to do with the evolutionary changes worked upon us by virtue of our exposing ourselves to unusually high amounts of mutagens in foods as we expanded our diet, and drugs and foods come in here. The other part of the equation, which is much more speculative and which we'll talk about tomorrow night, has to do with the notion of an attractor and of trying to look at humanness not as a mistake, a cosmic error, or as Heidegger said of man, he said we are flung into being. The idea always being that it doesn't make sense, that there's an arbitrariness to us. But I think that there's a way of analyzing process that will show that we are not only part of what is going on, an embedded part of what is going on, but that we actually represent the place where all the eggs are poured into one basket. And I'll just say a little bit about this tonight. When you look at the history of the universe, if you look with unbiased eyes, I think that what you will see is that the universe is a novelty-producing and conserving system of some sort. The early universe was so simple that we're going with science here for a minute, we're asked to believe that it sprang from nothingness in a single moment, that its diameter was less than that of an electron, and then in a very short period of time, a number of very dramatic things happened, but they are all couched in terms of an expansion and cooling. From the moment the universe is born, it begins to cool. And as it cools, complexity magically crystallizes out. The original universe, there weren't even atoms, because there was such high temperatures that atoms could not stabilize themselves into orbits around atomic nuclei. So there was what's called a plasma, just a soup of naked electrons. And then, gradually, as the universe cooled, the simplest of all atomic systems was able to form, the hydrogen atom. And these hydrogen atoms were produced in staggering amounts, and they began to clump together. And this is tricky, but not our problem. This is a problem for science. They don't know why they clumped, because it should have all been smooth, right down to today. But it isn't. So in this clumping process, of course, great temperatures and pressures were created at the centers of these masses of hydrogen, and a novel process, therefore, could spring into existence, the process of fusion. And fusion of hydrogen in early stars cooked out heavier elements, iron, sulfur, and especially carbon. Well, after that, then you get all those molecular or atomic species, and then they can aggregate into molecular species. And then, because of the presence of 4-valent carbon, very complex molecules called polymers, which are chain molecules, can form. Some of them acquire the quality of being able to replicate. Some of them acquire the ability to enclose themselves in a membrane, and so forth and so on. And in short, the march is on toward you and I here this evening. But what's interesting to note is that each successive stage in this process happens more rapidly than the process which preceded it. So that the early universe, 10 billion years goes on, and it's all in about this star formation cookout thing. And then, planetary formation. Then once you get, and then 1 billion years, they wait for primitive prokaryotic life. And then, once it happens, the eukaryotes follow fast, and after them, the ciliated protozoas, and, it's just a moment to Madonna. Both of them. Okay, now, what science says about this process is that what we're seeing is an illusion, or that it doesn't matter. They're saying it is not a law of the universe that novelty be conserved, and that each new level of novelty proceed more quickly than the one which was its parent. And so by chopping it off like that, human history is denied any relevance in the natural order. It is not part of the natural order. And even though we think we're a secular society, our assumptions about history are straight out of Genesis. We do not think of history as a branch of biology, and which it obviously is. So what I believe is happening is an accelerating process of novelty conservation that has reached such a point now, at the close of the second millennium, that it is absurd to try to propagate the human future by fantasy centuries into the future. There is no future, because the rate of acceleration is so close to approaching infinity that no possible future can be imagined. Now, people talk about this, but they never draw the implications. You've probably seen some show on television talk where they say, here's the curve of human energy release, and here's the Stone Age, and here's the 16th century, and here's the 20th century, and it's headed for infinity. Okay, next slide. Here's the curve of human speed. In the 1750, people could go as fast as a horse could gallop. In 1820, the steam engine, and then the 20th century, and then it goes to infinity. And they say, okay, here's the human population curve. In the year 1000, there were 400 million people on Earth. In the year 1850, and so forth, and it goes to infinity. So they don't believe it. They don't believe that the rational extrapolation of the trends visibly beheld in the present preclude the possibility of any imaginable future. Or at least I don't believe so. I believe that we're actually in the grip of a process that cannot be halted or accelerated, but which is now in a process of tightening its gyres, as William Butler Yeats said, that what we call the chaos of 20th century history is in fact the speeding up of this temporal process to the point where it is now visible within a single human lifetime. I mean, we're like mayflies or something, you know, we're born one day and we die the next. So only the most incredibly accelerated kinds of change make any impression upon us whatsoever. I mean, mostly we say nothing happens. But in fact, you know, in the 20th century, it's incredible. In the last 12 months, there has been more change compressed into time than in the previous 20 years. And those 20 years had more change in them than the previous 100 years. And that 100 years had more change in it than the previous 1,000 years. And that 1,000 years had more change in it than the previous 10,000 years. But science tells us this is meaningless. This is not a real, legitimate phenomenon that you're talking about. You're just lining up facts to make it appear as though there is an attractor, to make it appear as though the human historical enterprise is about to run itself into a stone wall or off a cliff or into another dimension. And this is really the question, I think, because psychedelics are, or were once described as consciousness-expanding drugs. Phenomenological description, consciousness-expanding drugs. Well, if that's true, or if there's even the slimmest possibility that that's true, then we have to avail ourselves of these things, because consciousness is precisely what we are starving for the lack of. And history is no longer rationally apprehendable by the systems which created it. I mean, everybody who's running around gloating over what happened to Marxist-Leninism should understand that Marxist-Leninism is traceable right back to the social contract theory of Rousseau, and that Western liberalism is traceable to the same root. And the crisis of Marxism is they just died first, that's all. But all these ideologies are on the brink of a coronary thrombosis, and we're going to have to catch the falling bodies when it hits. I mean, do you think that mercantile capitalism, which extracts the environmental reserves at an ever-accelerating rate, has any future whatsoever on this planet? I mean, they're just looting the last few $100 billion worth of stuff before they announce that everybody's going to have to go on a diet that will drop your jaw, you know. So we've come to the end of our rope. So then what do we have to do about it? Well, what we have to do is we have to look back in time and find cultural models that served in the past. And, you know, many of you who've been here before have heard me talk about what I call the archaic revival, an effort to jerk 20th century culture 180 degrees and send it right back to the value systems of the high Paleolithic, because that's the last moment that intelligence, language, religion coexisted with nature on this planet in a less than fatal arrangement. You know, from at the moment that agriculture was invented, the die was cast. Because first of all, agriculture is a strategy for dumping a huge database, the database of the hunter-gatherer, and replacing it with a database that is important for only 5 or 6 species of plant. You then give up nomadism, which begins to concentrate your impact on the land into one place. You then plant these crops, and you have such success producing food that now moving anywhere is unthinkable. Plus, the big project after the Fall Harvest Festival is now we have to build a wall to keep the starving people from stealing our surplus. So immediately there's us successful people and those people who weren't successful and who have different cultural values and who didn't produce a food surplus. So, we've decided we're going to sharpen sticks and kill all of them. So then you have warfare, thicker walls, retreat into cities, standing armies, defense of territory, class structure emerge, the notion of wealth as an abstraction, because wealth in an Aboriginal society is a sharpened stone, not your portfolio with your investments neatly listed, you see. So this is, just a pass over these themes. I know a lot of people came hundreds of miles and drove a long way today, and I tend to whip you with this stuff. But the idea is that the psychedelics are more than the best fun there is, which they are. More than a tool for exploring your own psyche and straightening out your own kinks, which they are. They are, in fact, the key to understanding the pathology that culture has become and the way out. I mean, there has to be a way out, and it really is this archaic revival. I mean, and if you're resisting it, think of it this way. If we don't organize the archaic revival, it will be handed to us on a platter in the form of failed agriculture because the ozone hole is screwed up, infrastructures falling apart, financial systems falling apart, the rise of fundamentalist religion. In other words, we are going to have a return to a previous historical model, and it can either be managed humanely through an honoring of the feminine, an honoring of the earth, a return to the techniques of ecstasy that characterized the high Paleolithic shamanism, or it can be handed to us in the form of shortages, famines, disease, internecine warfare, nuclear proliferation, toxic dumping, so forth and so on. But one way or another, this whole edifice put in place by the Renaissance and jacked up to high speed by the European Enlightenment and delivered into this hellish climax by mathematical analysis and the rise of global technology. I mean, remember, each of us has never seen these changes within a lifetime, and yet within the past 200 years, the world has gotten tremendously more pathological, tremendously more ill. The size of cities, the power to extract natural resources, to mine Siberia and the mountains of Chile and the interior of the Amazon and Borneo, and these unimaginable technological infrastructures have been put in place to sustain a dying patient. I mean, that's what we have here. We're on respirators. We're getting intravenous feeding. They are monitoring everything because it's not healthy. It can only be sustained through the most extraordinary and heroic means. We're taking bone marrow from the children of the future in order to keep a corpse alive. And people don't find their voice. They don't seem to know how to call a halt. You know, I mean, I listen to the politicos who aspire to leadership, and, you know, they have the same problem with the vision thing as the maximum leader of the present moment. So these are the things that we'll talk about this weekend, and you must steer me, or I will harangue. And it's not a pretty sight, I must tell you.
Are there legal ramifications, or do you have,
legal ramifications to this plant collection in Hawaii?
Are some of the plants regulated?
Well, this is sort of a touchy area. There's nothing that is out and out, drag them away kicking and screaming, illegal, like coca or something like that.
Sounds like it would irritate the authorities nonetheless.
It may potentially be some kind of irritant to them. You would have to be a field botanist of great skill and sophistication to find anything that was a problem. There are plants that have never been, that are in some nebulous dimension illegal, but there's never been a test case of it, you see. Because one of the things that would be a rational reformation of the drug laws, and would in fact follow the lead of English common law, is to distinguish between a plant and a drug. In fact, at one point I advocated what I called the Vegetable Drug Act, which would just be simply to state that plants are not drugs. And plants cannot be illegal. You can't make a portion of nature illegal. This is crazy thinking. One of the things that I talk about in my book that we've never talked about much in these weekends because the groups don't seem to have much interest in it, but I found it sort of fascinating, was, for example, in the case of opium, most of us grow up with a completely demonized vision of the morphine family. I mean, this is the lowest of the low, and if somebody gets mixed up in junk, it's just considered, slow suicide and so forth. And it is certainly true that heroin addiction is fairly destructive and doesn't do your relationships any good and that sort of thing. But it was very interesting to me in the process of writing this book to discover that opium, which has been known and used by human beings for at least 4,000 years, possibly longer, nobody ever suggested that opium was addictive until the 17th century, when the English physician John Playfair noted for the first time that exposure to opium created a craving for more opium. It had been used for 3,000 years without anybody ever noticing that it was addicting. And one of the tendencies that this book traces fairly clearly is the tendency to refine and strengthen drugs until they become social problems. We don't seem to rest until we push them to the most virulent, most destructive form. A good example of this that you're all familiar with is coca and cocaine and crack. Because coca is, if you go into a coca-using area of the Amazon or the Andes, the villagers, the people you meet, they are very well aware of the cocaine problem in the United States and the DEA and all this. And the first thing they want to tell you is, coca is not a drug, it's a food. And Tim Plowman, God rest his soul, a good friend of many of us, who died a few years ago, a great field botanist, he did studies of the nutritional value of coca and discovered that, in fact, in a coca-using population, up to 30% of the vitamins and minerals in the diet are coming from coca. And it is not a social problem. It does not lead to antisocial behavior or child abandonment or violence or anything like that. It is, in fact, largely, it makes life possible in the jungle because it gives you the energy that you must have. The jungle is an extremely encroaching place. And if the only tool you have to hold back the jungle is a self-sharpened machete, in the absence of coca, you would toss in the towel after a couple of weeks of struggling with this. In the presence of coca, you can settle down to a lifetime It's a short life. You'll be dead between 35 and 40. But a lifetime of struggling with the jungle. You see, one misconception that it's probably important to clear up that people have about the jungle is when they see the climaxed tropical rainforest, they assume that this tremendous richness of vegetation must signal a tremendous availability of food, fruits and things. This is not at all the case. It's very easy to starve to death in a tropical jungle. And the reason for this, especially an old tropical jungle like the Amazon, the reason for this is because evolutionary competition is so keen among species that there is no luxury to produce rich, juicy fruits loaded with sugars and stuff like that. I mean, often in the Amazon, people will show you what they're eating as a treat, something they found along the trail. And when you bear down on what it is, it's often a fruit or something like that that has just a millimeter thin film of slightly sweet pulp or something like that around it. There isn't it's not a place where it's easy to get a food supply together. So a drug like coca, which suppresses appetite, this is its second important consequence, is in great demand. And the suppression of appetite, the providing of energy, it's made for this very, very harsh environment. The other thing is there are other psychoactive compounds in coca, other so-called canes, and they mitigate the property of the cocaine. Western science got a hold of this and quickly turned it into cocaine, which is, very hard on the major muscles of the heart, highly addictive, and, a fairly pernicious drug, although it's the monkey doing it that you usually have to wonder about. And then, in our perverse way, we go to crack cocaine, which is an even more virulent form, more easily delivered. And the evolution of drug delivery systems is an interesting aspect of the whole drug problem. Hypodermic syringes were invented in the 19th century, just in time for the invention of morphine. And following on the heels of those two inventions were two great wars, the American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War in Europe, happening at roughly the same time. Out of those two wars emerged the first population of hard drug addicts in Western culture. There had never been anything like that before. At the close of the Civil War, morphine addiction was called the soldier's disease because there had been so much indiscriminate use of morphine on the battlefields of the Civil War. I am answering your question about agriculture, but stick with me here. So then this is, to my mind, the partnership paradise of prehistory in which the feminine was honored, men and women existed in equilibrium, child-caring was shared. Men, because of the strong upper body and different physical characteristics, were assigned the hunting, and also because women had babies clinging to them all the time and were not so mobile. So there was an early division of labor. And I think, although I wouldn't argue this to the death, but it seems reasonable to me, that women are probably the inventors of language. And for this, we can both thank them and, wonder about the consequences of it. Now, why would women be the inventors of language? It's because hunting is a fairly generalized concept where great emphasis is placed on stoic waiting and physical strength. You need to be able to keep your mouth shut for hours and hours at a time, sitting stock still, waiting, and then when the moment comes, just wail on whatever it is that's running by. The position of the... Well, the gatherer is an entirely different problem, and the women took the gathering. What gathering is all about is fine distinctions. You want to be able to say, when someone says to you, where did you find these wonderful roots? You want to be able to say, they're down near the sulfur spring. They grow in the ground underneath the plant with the small yellow flowers and the serrated leaf edge with the furry underneath. In other words, it's a tremendous problem of location linguistically. And if any of you are botanists, you know that until the invention of photography, botany created a whole special language for itself called taxonomic description, where you would say, well, this plant is cespitose with crenellate leaves, and trichomes are present, and what this is an excruciatingly detailed physical description. And women also were socialized more than men because they shared child care, they spent time together in food preparation, and food preparation is part of it as well. You have to be able to not only tell where the plant came from, you have to create a linguistic machine for conveying how it is to be used. Well, I think that this partnership paradise was really the moment when human beings were most human, most at peace within and without, between men and women, between adults and children, between the human family and the environment, because we were nomadic, our populations were kept small, and I think that the sexual style of these early human beings, that we can reconstruct it by looking at phenomenon like the pygmy chimpanzees, and then looking at sexual and social styles among Aboriginal people like in the Amazon. And the chief thing that comes out of that is group values predominate. So consequently, the great tension that drives our society, which is the tension of mate claiming and holding, which we call, maintaining and breaking relationships, really wasn't there. In that hunter-gatherer, quasi-nomadic situation, the natural style would have been orgiastic. And orgy has a very interesting social consequence. It makes it impossible for men to trace lines of male paternity. This is very important. In other words, the children in an orgiastic society are society's children. Women know who their children are because they see them come out of their bodies, and unless they put them down and forget where they put them, they will always be able to go back to their children. Because the sex act and the fact of birth are separated by 9 months, it took a long, long time for the role of the specific male to dawn on these societies. Once male paternity becomes an issue, there's tremendous tension, because the orgiastic style is appealing on one level to everybody, I think. But on another level, if you're concerned about male paternity, you want to suppress orgy. You want to control women. And in fact, you begin to think of them as my women and your women, and I have nothing to do with your women and you have nothing to do with my women. So women become a source of great anxiety in this situation. Well, now this is, I want to make it clear, this is not to say that we fell from grace from a state of grace that was laid on to us by nature, because the style of all monkeys is male dominance. Even if you go back to the primitive primates, the squirrel monkeys and like that, male dominance hierarchies are always what's happening. So I think that the admission of psilocybin into the proto-hominid diet actually corrected, if you want to use that word, corrected a social style that had been present in the monkeys for millions of years. And just for maybe 50 or 100,000 years, the tendency to form male dominance hierarchies was suppressed by this cult of psilocybin use on the plains of Africa. Well then, the very forces which created this situation, which were the drying up of the African continent, which shrank the great rainforests, broke up this partnership paradise, because the mushrooms became, instead of being abundant all year long on these rainy grasslands, the rains became less frequent. The distance between water holes became greater. The mushrooms became seasonal. The orgies, which had probably been lunar at first, become more stretched out. Maybe they're equinoctial and solstitial, and finally annual, and finally occasional, and finally they don't happen at all. Now, while this is going on, people are aware that the mushroom is getting harder to access. And so, for the first time, they begin thinking of strategies of preservation. And in a world without refrigeration, the obvious strategy is drying or preserving in some medium. Drying of mushrooms is not an effective strategy unless you have hermetically sealed peanut butter jars and Ziploc baggies and stuff which we presume they didn't have. So then your only choice is some method of preservation. And what I see in the archaeology of the ancient Near East is a supplanting of the mushroom cult by a cult of honey. And honey is a very excellent antiseptic preserving medium. And in many cultures, it's used that way. In Mexico to this day, in the Mexican Indian villages, they put the mushrooms and stir them into honey, and then they can preserve them for many months that way. There's a problem here, though, which is that honey itself can become an intoxicating substance. Honey ferments into mead, which is a crude form of alcohol. Well, alcohol could hardly be more different than psilocybin in terms of the social values that it promotes. Alcohol promotes an inflated sense of ego, an inflated sense of one's linguistic skill, and a lowering of sensitivity to social cueing. You see this in any singles bar, you know. The guys become boorish, they hit on the women because now finally they have the courage to hit on the women, and the whole thing gives rise to the fairly unhappy cultural situation of which we're the heirs. I mean, most women, I don't know how true it is of the women in this room under 30, but most women, their early sexual imprinting goes on in an ambiance of alcohol use and abuse. And that's then lifelong because, it steals one's nerves for love and battle. This is what was, or love or battle. This is what was always said about alcohol. So the women who were the gatherers of this hunting and gathering equation, essentially they were too smart. They outsmarted themselves. They had this enormous database on wild plants and plants that could be gathered in the environment. and they were nomads. And what nomadism means in this African context is that you follow the great herds of cattle around on a yearly cycle as they move from waterhole to waterhole. And you camp for a few weeks, and then you move on following the herds. The problem with this is in the discard of these camps, in the middens of these camps, there would inevitably be seeds discarded as waste. Well, at a certain point, women noticed that the middens, the dumps of last year's camp, was a great place to find food, because it seemed to concentrate in those places. And it was because the seeds were being discarded there. So at some point, a Lady Einstein of the High Paleolithic put it together. And it's interesting, this has to do with the conquest of the temporal dimension in terms of cause and effect. In other words, at the same time that the guys were figuring out, oh, if you have sex with this woman, then 9 months later there will be a child, the women were figuring out, oh, if we throw food away here and bury it, 12 months later there will be food growing on this very spot. Well, at that point, this huge database of information on plants that could be gathered was dumped. And the women said, we don't have to do that anymore. Let's just take what we know about emmer wheat, rye, oats, and a couple of other cereal grains, and we will grow those, and we don't have to gather anymore. Or gathering can decline in importance tremendously. But in order to care for the emmer wheat and the rye and the oats, the sedentary lifestyle displaced the nomadic lifestyle. And I talked a little bit last night about the consequences of the invention of agriculture. The first consequence was surplus, something the human race had never dealt with before, because in the hunter-gatherer situation, once you've gathered enough, you stop working. Agriculture is a process where you sort of push a button, and lo and behold, here comes abundance. More abundance than you know what to do with. So you have a new problem. The problem is not getting enough food. Now the problem is preserving it and defending it. And both of these problems can be solved by ceasing to wander and beginning to build walls. And so this is what was done. The most advanced structure, human structure on this planet 10,000 years ago was the grain tower at Jericho. And it was specifically built for agricultural surplus, and it was built with walls around it to defend itself. Around 10 to 11,000 years ago, in the archaeological record, all across Europe, the ancient Middle East, and North Africa, we get the appearance of what's called the Tanged Point Technocomplex. What this means is, in older strata than the strata of the Tanged Point Technocomplex, when you find an arrowhead, you find one arrowhead. It was lost by some Paleolithic hunter in the pursuit of game. 12,000 years ago, what you suddenly find are huge concentrations of arrowheads in one place. This means these are not hunting sites. These are sites where somebody laid siege to somebody else's scene in order to grab their women and their food supply and their animals. In other words, warfare is the natural consequence of agriculture. And the cultural pattern that we see in the ancient Middle East is a pattern of walled cities, kingship, suppression of women, slavery, and bronze-tipped warfare. All the progenitors of our own curiously twisted cultural adaptation are set in place there.
So, this is a point which may be only important to me, but what you're saying is that really once the first woman or group of women, whoever it was, made this temporal connection and saw that, we ship the seeds out or whatever happens, 12 months later there's more food, we don't have to wander around so much. And once that happened, the die was cast, for McDonald's and the military-industrial complex, in effect. And that once some tribe or bunch of people have a lot more than they could use, and it's there, then it becomes tempting and in a way adaptive for other people to say, why wander around out here, screw around, let's just go kill these people and take their shit.
Right.
And that's a lot easier.
Right.
Now, and also what you're saying is that nobody noticed that this was fucked up at the time.
Well, it happened over a very long period. And the other thing that I'm saying is... go ahead.
No, to me that seems to be an important point. In other words, there was a major maladaptive cultural development that happened over a lot of time. Yeah. At the time, nobody else was noticing that this was bad.
And it was driven by weather, see. It was driven by the fact that things were just getting drier and people were trying to find a solution to the drying problem.
Nobody thought to say, if we don't store up all this stuff, these other people won't be trying to kill us.
Right. Nobody could conceive of how to return to the nomadic style. And of course, once people started agriculture, then in some cases to be a nomad meant you would have to move through these people's areas and their fields, and then they would be waiting for you with rocks and clubs because they don't want your herds tromping through their fields. But the real key factor, which straight anthropology doesn't acknowledge, is that the slow fading of the use of psilocybin is what permitted all of this, because the boundary dissolving quality of psilocybin is the most important quality, and it changed us from monkeys into these shamanic, feminine-honoring, goddess-worshipping, nomadic people. And then when it began to fade, the reassertion of these older primate patterns, the reestablishment of male dominance over women, and so forth, there was nothing to stop it. So I really see psilocybin as a kind of inoculation against the primate nature, that before the first moment of human history, the human being had been perfected. And by that I mean human beings means people able to express affection and care for others, people filled with a sense of group cooperation and group destiny, and so forth and so on. And that really we should see psilocybin as an inoculation against the formation of ego. Ego is the psychic component, which is the fly in the soup. And the ego, it's a maladaptive attitude which changing conditions made into an adaptive attitude. It went from being a form of pathology to being the only game in town as the nature of the situation changed. Ego is dissolved by hallucinogens, and so the hallucinogens kept this egoless society in a kind of stasis for a long, long time. But when the presence of the mushroom weakened and disappeared, then these older primate patterns flowed in and dominated the situation. In the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis, you essentially get this message, except it's told from a dominator point of view. I mean, a careful reading of Genesis will show this is the story of history's first drug bust. And it's a woman who's in trouble. What she does is she eats a forbidden fruit. It's forbidden to her by a male, by Yahweh. And she also corrupts her roommate. And and if you read in the older recensions, like the Q document, it's very clear. It says that their eyes were opened. The issue is not that this is a poisonous plant. At one point in the story, Yahweh, walking in the garden, mumbles to himself, if they eat of the fruit of the tree of life, they will become as we are. The issue was one of a striving for equality on the part of the human beings and a suppression of that desire for equality by this gardener, this keeper of the garden, whoever this guy was. And so then in the story, they're tossed out of Eden. And it says an angel was set at the eastern gate of Eden with a flaming sword so that they could never make their way back in to Eden. To my mind, this is simply the African sun drying up this partnership paradise. About 10,000 BC, people begin to settle in the Nile Valley. Before that, people didn't live in the Nile Valley. It was an unhealthy place. It was a boggy, malarial lowland, and people lived in what we call the Sahara Desert, but which was then the Saharan grassland. It was only when the grassland turned to desert that people moved out of the grassland and then settled near the river, and those are the proto-dynastic civilizations of the Egyptian archaeological record. In the Tesseli Plateau in southern Algeria, there are rock paintings 7,000 to 15,000 years old that show shamans with mushrooms sprouting out of their bodies and being held hands full of mushrooms. They're reproduced in my book here. So I think part of what is happening in the 20th century is we're making our way back into deep time, and we're discovering our own childhood, and what we're discovering is a pattern of abuse and trauma. The reason human beings are so given to addiction and so restlessly uncomfortable with being is because we, every single one of us, are the victims of a dysfunctional relationship and a trauma that occurred in the childhood of our species. We were meant to be the mushroom-using monkey. We were meant to be to have a balanced relationship between the masculine and the feminine. We were meant to be the caretakers of the earth. But when the connection to the mushroom was broken, then we turned to building grain silos, forging spears, building walled cities, establishing the mythology of kingship, slave classes, so forth, and so on. And this is why the rediscovery of these things in the 20th century is so important, because we have now been at this male dominator linear culture for about 7,000 or 8,000 years, depending on how you want to measure it, and it has pushed us to the brink of extinction. Not only us, but the entire planet is now threatened with upheaval, mass extinction, toxification, because of our maladaptation to being. We don't know how to behave. Yeah, Paul.
I sort of question another longer-term scenario here. There's some evidence that humans have consistently wiped out. For example, we may have wiped out the Neanderthals, who may have been, despite what has been said in the past, peaceful, evolved species. And then earlier on, we may have wiped out, as more monkeys, wiped out some of the other pre-humans. And then what about the great mammoths and other mammals, which seem to get wiped out just at the time when humans were developing into this real hunting trip.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is true. There was a big paleontological conference in Canada a few years ago devoted to studying the Ice Age extinctions of the great mammals. And the conclusion was it had to be human beings.
Because, I mean, they had been through many cycles of ice ages. Why should they suddenly disappear in the last ice age?
Yes, I think
humans were driven into this hunting.
Very early we began making this kind of impact on the Earth.
I want to ask you if you believe there's a distinction between appropriate use of these drugs then and now between men and women.
You mean a different way to do it?
Yeah, appropriate use.
Nobody's ever asked me that question before.
And addiction concerns. Even
You
though
mean-
the word question.
Yeah, what was the question?
The question over here was, is there a different protocol, or should there be a different protocol for men and women using mushrooms or using psychedelics? And the question over here was...
Just adding to that, in present day and addiction concerns, because we seem to have such a problem with addiction in terms of, abusing all these drugs that can really help us. So how do we?
Well, I think what we have to do is we have to bring this issue into consciousness, which is never done in a cultural context. I mean, why do we take drugs is the real question. And I think that, the answer, I mean, why do we take bad drugs? Let's ask that question. I think it's because we want to scratch a certain itch and we can't figure out how to get at it. And so people, they addict to sex, to money, to drugs, to having the morning paper delivered on time. I mean, myself am threatened with falling into a hysterical rage if I get up and there are no eggs. So, I have to consciously take hold of myself and say, you're not going to die if you have to drive into town and buy a dozen eggs. So don't let it spoil your entire day, The question about a protocol for men and women, I think it is true that men have more of a problem with drugs than women, and more of a problem, it's because they have more of a problem with the surrender issue. Women, by virtue, and it's not so true of modern women, but modern women are a very recent phenomenon on the scene. Women are biologically scripted for these boundary-dissolving experiences because they will, in a traditional society, give birth, usually many, many times in their life. And every single time, it's a complete boundary-dissolving tremendum. A man, if he's careful, can go from birth to the grave without ever getting into a tight spot like that. And
What you say is that these drugs help to balance this male-dominating tendency for quite a while, and certainly now, in its resurgence, it seems to be a real wonderful way to explore a much greater harmony. So you're talking about letting go of the ego, especially the male ego. So I wondered, is there not a place there for the woman or the female of the species to explore that, or a need? No need, no obligation, no...
No, there's a need, because you see, nothing on earth is as much like a man as a woman. We tend to forget this. And ego is not now a male problem. we are all completely infected by ego, because it's a tradition. I mean, even the rhetoric of feminism in some cases is a rhetoric of ego strengthening. They say, be assertive, don't take this stuff anymore, stand up for what you are. Well, that's all very good, except that it isn't the feminine that you are always standing up for. Sometimes it's just sheer assertiveness, which is an ego kind of thing. I think that women have a slight jump on men, but at this late stage in the game, everybody has to do work on this problem, because we have made ego such a cultural value. Now, the reason men may have stronger egos generally than women goes back, I think, to that hunting-gathering dichotomy again. Women, when they went gathering, would go 2 or 3 women with their babies on their backs, and while they were gathering, in all primitive societies you always hear about the chatter of the women. Women do chatter. As the masters of language, they exist in a sea of this kind of communication. Guys don't talk to each other. It's very rare. And if in your life you were repeatedly, over and over again, told, okay, you stay here on this point and you watch all day long, and we will drive the game by at evening, and then you make the kill. I've been in that situation because I was forced through these male initiations in the meathead society I grew up in. And if you're a 10-year-old, 14-year-old kid, and they set you up on what they call a point, a hunting point, they give you a gun and they set you up on a point and they say, wait here 5 hours. The major struggle is to not be dissolved into the environment, to not become frightened, or it's called Wendigo psychosis, It's to hold the wilderness at bay. And so you have to have rituals of ego empowerment to do that. And the hunter is the exemplar of ego personified. So I think just these different cultural styles made men more egotistical, and also they didn't have, women are naturally hormonally scripted to transfer loyalty and self-identification to their children. It's a much more abstract thing for a male to put his child first. For a woman, it's unthinkable that it could be any other way. For a man, it's a consciously argued decision. Ego is our problem. I mean, you can talk about nuclear waste or nuclear proliferation, but it all gets back to we are not willing to set aside our desires for big houses and many cars and tremendous comfort. And we do not have group values. The reason the planet is dying is because we cannot place the good of the group above our own desires consistently. We know the earth is dying, and yet, who recently has made a voluntary act of simplification of their life or something like that? We're aware of the problem, but we can't. Some do, but a vanishingly small amount compared to the people who are just out there striving like crazy to get theirs. And sadly, the dissolution of communism, which certainly had its problems, they're there for everybody to see, but the rhetoric of communism was collectivism. Care for the collectivity. In the absence of anybody saying that, now we just have a dog-eat-dog world, and the devil take the hindmost, and it looks like the devil will take the hindmost.
Problems with ego is that it's one of those words that mean all things to all people, and I think we need to say that even in the societies where mushrooms were plentiful and boundary dissolution took place, people came down eventually, and development. I think you were the one who once said that you need an ego, so if you're in a restaurant, you take your fork and put it in your mouth instead of somebody else's. Developmentally, it's a scaffold on which you build personality.
Well, I think our millions of years of primate existence give us a pretty strong ego. And then it was just this brief interlude with psychedelic plants that changed it. And let me say a little bit more about that. It sounds sort of clinical to say that it's ego dissolving. It's like we're dissolving a cyst or something. And that's a good metaphor as far as it goes. But why is the ego dissolving is a good question. What is it about psilocybin that causes the ego to dissolve? Well, I think what it is it shows you the true size of the world. And in the presence of the true size of the world, you finally figure out how important you are. And you aren't important. You know, you don't matter a jot or a tittle in the big picture. You know, you get a picture of 10 million years and 10 local light years of space, and then you say, well, how important is it, what I think? And it's humbling. It's not disempowering. It's humbling. You see, aha, I should get with the program. I only have meaning if I get with the program. If I'm sailing against the program, it's like an ant railing against God. I mean, who cares? What difference does it make? I've always thought that the supreme expression of ego in Western literature is Captain Ahab of Moby Dick. I mean, this is ego unchained, ego raised to the status of deity. It's a losing battle. But at one point, I think in chapter 53, the quarterdeck, the first mate, Starbuck, who represents Christian right reason, says, they're talking about Moby Dick, and he takes the animal rights position, and he says to Ahab, he says, Captain, to seek revenge on a dumb brute seems blasphemy. And Ahab turns on him in fury, and he says, blasphemy, Starbuck? Speak not to me of blasphemy. I would strike out the sun if it insulted me. For could it do that, then could I do the other, since there is ever a sort of fair play. The ego believes that it's on a level playing field with God Almighty. What could be more egotistical than that, you know? So psychedelics, whatever they do for us in our personal lives, as a societal force, they dissolve the ego. And what is it that they dissolve it into? Why is it so wonderful to dissolve the ego? This now comes to the sort of, we've been talking evolution and so forth, and it all makes sense, and I don't think it frightens anybody because it's all happening on safe ground. But in fact, what lies behind all this, what you find when you dissolve the ego, is this mind, this intelligence, which seems to be distributed through nature, and which, if you're really alienated, you will call the alien, because you don't know what else to call it. If you're a woman in touch with what that means, you will call it Gaia. If you're an aspiring shaman, you will call it the spirit helpers. But the big news is that the rise of the ego has suppressed a portion of reality, which is that nature is an animate and minded thing of some sort. And this breaks the rule. I mean, it's okay to say it's animate. You have the Gaia hypothesis, and that everybody congratulates themselves on what a leap forward that is, and it is. But it's quite another step to realize that it is not that the earth is alive. It's that the earth is intelligent. The earth is some kind of mind. And before we throw up our hands and say, well, how could that be? How could a planet have a mind? Is it any less peculiar that a monkey could have a mind? You know? How do monkeys have minds? That's the miracle. A planet is a very large system, probably able to pull many tricks out of the bag. It's our portion of mind that is so puzzling. And what shamanism is about, psychedelic shamanism, is connecting back into this Gaian mind. And I confess, you can't take the measure of a thing like this to say, is it a god or a goddess? Is it an extraterrestrial that has somehow lodged in the ecosystem of this planet and permeates it somehow as a distributed mind? We can't know what it is, but its presence has something to do with our presence here. What stabilizes shamanic and aboriginal societies and what stabilized those Paleolithic societies was this direct pipeline to the mind of the goddess. And it told human beings how to behave, what to do, how to live. Isn't this what what Castaneda is claiming for psychedelics? They show you the right way to live. And in the absence of this connection, you can't figure it out. You know, I mean, you can sort of figure it out, but we have lost touch with our mentor. We were literally wrenched from the teaching breast of the Gaian mother too soon. And so we became dysfunctional, turned to warfare, city building, resource extraction, and propaganda.
Terence, can you tie in you were talking about the rate of evolution of the brain and the biological process that went through and a time frame for that? And do you think that the shape of the brain or the predominance of different parts of it at different stages have anything to do with this idea of ego or shared experience through an evolving brain? The mushroom that sounded like you were talking about was a catalyst for that.
Well, I think what the mushroom is the catalyst for is language. You see, I mean, language is a very mysterious activity. In all of nature, if you were to look for the thumbprint of God, this is the best candidate. Language represents a fundamental break with all other forms of natural organization. And, you know, there may be people here who are fond of the mumblings of dolphins or there is communication in the natural world, but it's a long way from the brightest dolphin who ever lived to Paradise Lost or Hamlet. I mean, we are creatures of language on a level that is not met anywhere else. And our language flows out into three-dimensional space. You see, culture is the condensation of language. This building is an idea that we have then wrought in stone and wood. Esalen is an idea. San Francisco is an idea. The United States is an idea. Means they are things which begin originally in the domain of language, and then we draw them down into matter. And, the fact that you can recognize instantly millions of sentences that you've never heard before. Chomsky and his school has spent a lot of time trying to understand this. So language is like the privileged vehicle by which human beings relate to the world. And interestingly enough, psychedelics, especially psilocybin, triggers language-like activity. It causes what's called glossolalia, speaking in tongues. Speaking in tongues is simply language in the absence of sanctioned meaning. You know, it means you've got words, you've got declension, you've got grammar, but you just didn't bother to have meaning. And I think that, you know, we tend to believe language is for the conveyance of meaning. But I think that's just because we came late to thinking about the problem. Obviously, it seems to me, people were indulging in language-like activity for a long, long time before there was meaning. It was a form of entertainment. It's a form of amusement. It's something people did around the fire at night for each other. All, you know, the original languages were all abstract. The marriage of language to naive realism is probably less than 15,000 years old and has to do with agriculture and the rise of all this other stuff. Yeah.
Is that what you were doing at the end of the experiment at Melbourne?
Oh, you mean that funny stuff? Yes. The ning mai waxi ki pitot nem vidi ki piltek ne dam qua haxi ki pipin. See how there's emotion and there's intentionality and there's anticipation, but there's no meaning. Meaning is just the cherry on the cake. It comes very, very late in that process. And one of the strange things about us as a species is our absence of an emotional vocabulary. You know, we have 10,000 words to describe the process of binding a book, for crying out loud. But when it gets down to emotion, we have, you know, I love you, I hate you, and I'm not sure. And yet, if you pay attention to your mind, the subtlest and most kaleidoscopic dimension of your being is the shifting screen of your emotions. And yet we can convey only the tiniest part of that to each other. A place like Esalen is built on trying to open the valve to emotional language so that people can say what they feel. Most people, including myself, I'm sure, have not the clue as to how you begin to say what you feel. The psychedelic experience is a good place to begin because these feelings are so unusual that you can sort of attempt to language them without feeling you're going too far out on a limb with your personal being. But when you start talking to somebody about, you know, what is that poem? Is it by Robert Browning? How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. To say to someone, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways, and then to actually try to compose your own list in real time, it's too, quote unquote, embarrassing. Whatever that means. It means we don't want to go that way. We want to mask ourselves. We feel reluctance to push in to that domain. And I assume this is because this was what happened to language. Well, no, it may have always been that way. It is a thing of surfaces. I mean, it's tremendously easy to use language to describe a plant. Very hard to use it to describe a mood. Maybe this is because you can eat plants and not moods, and so it's ultimately a tool, a survival skill. But our poetry, our art, the places where we rise toward the perfection of our humanness are usually in the domain of language married to emotion, you see. Yeah.
Question about the place of pecking order in all this that you're talking about. In most animals, you see a pecking order emergence. And my feeling from my own experiments is that as far as psilocybin mushrooms, when I was in Palenque, where the Mayan civilization is, the people who live there don't use those mushrooms. The people who, I got the strong feeling that the people who were in the Mayan civilization at the time did not use them, but that the priests did, and that perhaps way back, when you're talking way back in the early evolution of things, that whoever was on the top of the pecking order either got the best mushrooms or kept the mushrooms for themselves or away from the people. That the knowledge that this could bring to normal people was antithetical to the needs and desires of the ones who were higher up in the pecking order.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. The scenario you sketch out is what's called the Grand Inquisitor scenario. You all remember in the Brothers Karamazov the story that Ilya, or one of them, tells about how during the Inquisition Christ miraculously appears on earth, and he goes to visit the Grand Inquisitor, and then this conversation takes place between them, and the Inquisitor and Christ says, do you know who I am? And the Inquisitor says, yes, I know who you are. We don't want it. We've got it worked out. We don't need Galilean troublemakers. We've moved beyond that stage, and this is a similar sort of situation, I think. Priest, you see, it's a long slide from shamanism into priestcraft. And the way it happens, I think, is when the psychedelic becomes no longer accessible or understood, then priestcraft gets going with a vengeance. There's always a tendency or a tension in religion between the irrational force of revelation and the desire to institutionally organize. Early Christianity was victim of this. For the first 120 years after the crucifixion, Christians were useless to anybody because they just stood around waiting for the end of the world. And then after 120 years of this, some people, Tertullian, Origen, Justinian, that crowd, said, shouldn't we be investing in real estate and getting a little something together here? This waiting for the end of the world, hell, who knows, And so then the institutionalized church sprang into being. Another place in cultural history where this happened is in the mystery that surrounds Soma. Soma was some kind of psychedelic plant. Nobody knows for sure what it was, but the whole of the Rig Veda, which is the earliest stratum of the Hindu literature, the whole of the Rig Veda is hymns to Soma. These incredibly extravagant praise for this intoxicant of some sort, which the people were using. Well, if it was so wonderful, how could it ever be lost? How could you ever lose? It would be like our civilization losing the secret of how to make Coca-Cola. It's almost impossible to imagine an upheaval so thoroughgoing that we would forget how to make Coca-Cola. And so then we would collect Coke bottles and say, this represents the vanished sacrament, if only we knew. The only way you can lose a secret with that kind of cultural import is if prior to the loss of it, knowledge of it has been restricted.
What they want. It's the same with pups and most any kind of animal. So why would it be different for humans? That I think that the humans who got a little bit on top decided that this was not a good thing for others to have.
Well, what I'm saying is it would only be true in the case of humans if they were using psilocybin. In other words, in the absence of psilocybin, human beings will behave like kittens, calves and pups, but that psilocybin actually erodes the ego. And this is what's put against a lot of psychedelics. They say, well, the guy won't, these stoners, they don't punch the time clock. And when you threaten to fire them, it seems to have no effect on them. I don't know how you reach these people. Well, the way you reach them is you appeal to something other than the ego. The modern industrial civilization has very skillfully promoted certain drugs and suppressed others. A perfect example is caffeine. Caffeine, I hate to tell you this, caffeine is a fairly dangerous drug. It isn't dangerous in that a cup of coffee will kill you, but a lifestyle built around caffeine is you're not going to live to be 100 years old, or even 70 unless you are statistically in the improbable group. Why is caffeine not only tolerated but exalted? Because, boy, you can spin those widgets onto their winkles just endlessly without a thought on your mind. It is the perfect drug for modern industrial manufacturing. Why do you think caffeine, a dangerous, health-destroying, destructive drug that has to be brought from the ends of the earth, is enshrined in every labor contract in the Western world as a right? The coffee break, if somebody tried to take away the coffee break, the masses would rise in righteous fury and pull them down. We don't have a beer break. We don't have a pot break. I mean, if you suggested, well, we don't want a coffee break. We want to be able to smoke a joint at 11 in the morning. They would say, well, you're just some kind of, you're a social degenerate, a troublemaker, a mad dog, a criminal. It would be, and yet the health benefit ratio of those two drugs, there's no comparison. Obviously, pot would be the better choice. The problem is then you're going to be standing there dreaming rather than spinning the widgets onto the nuts. Right? Coca leaves would be very good. I suspect in the future we may see the legalization of coca as a sop to the mentality that wishes to see cocaine. Andy Wilde, who's a good friend of mine, we don't agree on everything, but a few years ago he had great enthusiasm for a coca chewing gum. And I never got on the bandwagon because I didn't see that we needed another high-focus industrial stimulant on the market. But coca would be great, and certainly in the Amazon, if you're a patron, you encourage your workers to chew coca. I mean, they're worthless without coca. Give them coca and put a machete in their hands and they will just flail for hours at the bush. Another example that's interesting that shows how blinded and unaware we are of how drugs have shaped our society. We all know that slavery ended in the United States in the Civil War. And most people, if you question them, think that slavery existed before the Civil War in many places back into ancient times. This is not true at all. Slavery died in Western civilization with the collapse of the Roman Empire. During the Dark Ages and the medieval period, if you owned a slave, you owned one slave. It was the equivalent of owning a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It was an index of immense wealth and social status. And that slave would be a house boy or a cook or something like that, someone close into you, taking care of you. It was inconceivable to use slave labor in the production of an agricultural product until Europe acquired an insatiable desire for sugar. And now let's think about sugar for a moment. nobody needs sugar. You can go from birth to the grave without ever having a teaspoonful of white sugar. You will never miss it. Throughout the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, sugar was a drug, a medicine. It was used to pack wounds, to keep wounds septic. And it was very expensive, and there was very little of it. Nobody even knew where it came from. It was called cane honey, because they knew it came from some kind of jointed grass, but nobody had a clear picture of what sugar was. Well, when you extract sugar from sugar cane, it requires, in pre-modern technology, a temperature of about 130 degrees. You cannot, free men will not work sugar. It's too unpleasant. You faint, you die from heat prostration. You have to take prisoners, and you have to chain them to the sugar vats. And so before the discovery of America, in the 50 years before the discovery of America, they began growing sugarcane in the East Atlantic Islands, Madeira and the Canary Islands. And they brought Africans and sold them into slavery specifically for sugar production. Now, when we get American history, they tell you that slaves were used to produce cotton and tobacco. In fact, this is not quite the truth. They had to find things for slaves to do because they brought so many slaves to the New World to work sugar, and they had so many children that then they just expanded and said, well, we've used slaves to work sugar, we might as well use them in cotton and in tobacco production. In 1800, every ounce of sugar entering England was being produced by slave labor of the most brutal and demeaning sort. And there was very little protest over this. It was just accepted. And to this day, sugar cultivation in the Third World is a kind of institutionalized slavery. Christian, the popes, the kings of Europe, all of Christian civilization acquiesced in the bringing back of a practice that had been discredited during the fall of Rome in order to supply the insatiable need for sugar. It was an addiction. It had no cultural defense whatsoever. Yeah.
Suppose honey didn't ascend to the prominence that sugar did in society?
I just think you can't produce enough of it. Look at the price of a pound of sugar today versus the price of a pound of honey. Isn't honey 5 to 10 times more expensive than granulated white sugar? I imagine this is always the case.
I don't agree with something. And maybe it's a matter of definition, but I don't think slavery died out. I think it was serfs were bound to the land. The Duke had the right to take the woman he wanted. The people belonged to him.
Well, you're right that serfdom replaced slavery, but in a way, serfdom was a much more humane system. First of all, you could not be separated from the land. Serfs were... So you could, and families were not separated. It was a kind of bondage to the land. But the separating of families, the selling of people at auction, and this kind of... Yeah. So you're right that serfdom persisted. But you see, in late Roman times, they had what was called the latifundia. And these were essentially agricultural concentration camps where people grew agricultural products under the lash for Roman markets. And that disappeared until the 1440s in the West. Anybody else have... Yeah.
You might want to say this too, but following this gentleman's question, I wonder if the psychedelic experience or psilocybin and its ego-dissolving properties and everything, what happens that an elite would control that and keep it from everyone else if it were truly ego-dissolving and unifying?
No, wait. So many people are saying, yeah, this must be an important point. I didn't understand it. What is it again?
What happens to make an elite few control a property that's unified and ego-dissolving and keep it for themselves and away from the populace?
Well, I think it's because these things have another quality, which we haven't talked too much about, which is the psychedelics are the source of special information. And these hierarchies want to control the information. I mean, in other words, it's the pipeline to God problem. And, the Protestant Reformation was a whole effort to overthrow the papal claim that you couldn't just pray. You had to have theologians interpret scripture and dogma, and they would gently guide you toward the right understanding, but that you weren't supposed to have a direct relationship to spirit. You were supposed to leave that to experts. So I think that's another issue, that the psychedelics empower with gnosis, true information, and every society is based on a lie of some sort. So having people going around the official lie and getting in touch with reality turns them into social dissidents, and you have to control that. I mean, that was exactly what happened in the 1960s. I mean, we can talk about it a little bit, but what happened was too many people were getting stoned and then checking out of the official canon of the culture. And people just said, you can take that job and shove it. And this was very alarming. Now, every society can tolerate a certain amount of this. You always have people who just aren't playing the game. But what happened in the 1960s was that LSD entered the picture. And LSD is different from all other psychedelic drugs in one tremendously important quality. And that is a single skilled chemist in a small apartment with about $40,000 worth of equipment in a single long weekend can produce 40 to 60 million hits of a drug. 40 to 60 million hits. This is a loaded gun at the head of society. Now, I wrote a book on growing mushrooms, and years ago, growed mushrooms quite a bit. And I can tell you, an absolutely dedicated mushroom grower working his ass off for 6 months can produce maybe 4,000 or 5,000 hits of mushrooms. In other words, it's entirely a neighborhood phenomenon. It doesn't affect the dials that measure the fate of society. But you produce 40 million hits of a drug, you have entered the realm of global politics. You now probably have more power. You and your friends probably now have more power to affect the fate of the world than, let's say, the government of Switzerland. Well, no, not Switzerland. They have the banks. But the government of Finland, let's say. You have just shoved Finland out of the way and taken your place in the hierarchy. So no government would put up with that for a moment.
It's analogous to splitting the atoms.
Yeah, they don't allow you to assemble nuclear warheads in your basement, and they're not going to allow you to manufacture LSD in your basement either for the same reason.
In a way, it sounds like the LSD then could be, well, LSD related to psilocybin is like cocaine related to coca in a way. If you look at it, it's too easy to get.
Well, it's not that there's something wrong with LSD. Here we have one hit of LSD. There's nothing wrong with it compared to one hit of psilocybin. The problem is that you can it's just like agriculture. Overproduction. It changes you from a tripper into somebody who thinks they should buy machine guns because you now have $5 million shoved under your mattress, and everybody knows you wouldn't dare take LSD in a situation like that. The presence of so much LSD has turned you into a defensive paranoid. Now you must defend your fortune. Forget LSD. It's changed from a vehicle of spiritual enlightenment into a commodity that must be defended at all costs. See?
The cost in terms of what the government thinks of this. I mean, you look at what the government's doing with drug sentences now, and just in Hawaii, for marijuana growing is a minimum 10-year sentence. And in a federal law for possession of nuclear weapons is a maximum of 12 years.
So if you have a joint, you get 10 years. If you're growing, you get 10 years. If you have a 10 megaton thermonuclear device,
you could get probation.
Well, that shows you where the alarms are sounding, doesn't it, folks? You see, the hidden issue, and it need not be hidden among us, the hidden issue, the government always tries to paint itself as the mother hen, concerned about her errant chicks. And so to keep you from crashing into other people on the freeway, to keep you from leaping out of buildings or committing suicide, we have to control these drugs. As a matter of fact, this is absurd. More people die because of alcohol than all illegal drugs combined in a given year. The government is not your friend on this issue. The government is very concerned to control the mass mind. And marijuana, my God, since the British Commission on Hemp, which was in 1889, I believe, the British East India Company commissioned a study of hemp. They have spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to find something, anything, you name it, wrong with cannabis. There is nothing wrong with cannabis. It is the most thoroughly tested, pawed over, and examined drug in human history. And they just come up with the lamest stuff. I mean, they tell you, you're going to have tits. Give me a break. They say you won't be motivated in your job. Like your job is supposed to be the sine qua non against which all things are to be measured.
And when I get a training bra.
Yeah, right. And I think people on our side of this question have been tremendously naive, because people just think we just have to convince them that it's harmless. It ain't harmless. It is a knife poised at the heart of dominator values. It would make the modern industrial assembly line, political loyalties, the macho image projection, all of these little tricks that they're running are severely eroded by cannabis, and they will stop at nothing to eradicate it. Look at the budget of the DEA. What are they doing? They're giving 65% is dedicated to cannabis eradication. Heroin gets 20% and coke gets all the rest. It's demonstrably absurd the way the money is spent unless you have a secret agenda of some sort. And if your agenda is to suppress the evolution of unwanted social attitudes in the American public, then you have to keep your eye on cannabis very, very closely.
To get even more diabolical, we won't waste a lot of time on this, but I mean, there's another agenda there, which is if you were in the business of making lots and lots of money off of illegal drugs, it would be very much in your interest, very much, to be sure that those drugs remain illegal.
And expensive.
I take the profit out of that.
Well,
I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, it may be true in in some regards.
In a different level of
Well, but Steve, the new guy who heads the war on drugs, Martinez, this guy, I heard him on NPR this week, and his most passionate moment in the half-hour interview was he said, "We have pushed the price of an ounce of cannabis past the price of an ounce of gold, and we're going to keep it that way." Nothing about eradication. Talk about keeping the price high.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the government's concerned, I mean, they're spending billions of dollars a year to prosecute and incarcerate drugs and specifically marijuana, not to mention the lost revenue that they could obtain by simply taxing it, which they would if it were available to those people who didn't have the wherewithal to grow it themselves.
Right. The fact that they refuse to tax it when they're starving for revenue shows that there must be a secret agenda. It doesn't make any kind of sense.
Something else going on there, too, is that if you have a government which needs to do many, many things which are untraceable, as soon as you put money into it, it's traceable. But drugs provide a really nice source of untraceable money. It's all like that.
Yeah, that's another level, and we might as well say a little bit about that. When I wrote this book, I did a lot of research and about an area I didn't know that much about, which is, let's say, from 1500 to the present, drugs of addiction. And what I discovered is drug smuggling is like assassination. If the government isn't involved, it never seems to really happen. And governments have been using drugs for centuries as forms of secret revenue. This whole sugar thing that I laid out to you, those were decisions made by the crown heads of Europe in collusion with the Pope. It wasn't common people who set those policies in place. During the 1960s, when the black ghettos began to come apart, suddenly number 3 China white heroin was cheaper and more available than it had ever been at any time in the history of the heroin problem in the United States. Why? Because the CIA saw, all these black guys are getting up a bunch of uppity niggers, as the government calls them. You just smother it in heroin. Get everybody either hooked or making money, and they're not...
It's absolutely brilliant. If that's your agenda, there's no better way to go about it. It's just like you couldn't invent a better drug than crack.
That's right.
You distract these people and just have them killing each other and not messing with, the real...
And they don't care really about the effect of drugs. And one group, one faction will work against another. For example, I'm a great aficionado of hashish. And hashish became very hard to get in the United States in the late 70s. But as soon as the Russians invaded Afghanistan, suddenly there was massive amounts of excellent Afghani hashish at prices that nobody had seen for 15 years. The reason was the CIA knows that hashish it's not really a problem, but what they wanted is they wanted an income for the mujahideen, and they had to pay for all these weapons. So they just started bringing this in wholesale, and it wasn't even a smuggling operation. I mean, I received reports from people who said, smuggling? They're not smuggling. They're unloading it on Pier 39 with the stevedore Union Local 1030 is taking off, 500-pound blocks of hashish by the tens of thousands. And the day the Afghan war ended, they had staged an enormous series of interlocking busts on their own infrastructure, and they closed it down and they pulled it to pieces. When Khomeini kicked out the Shah, the Iranian heroin business then fell under the control of the mullahs, and at that point, suddenly, cocaine emerges as a major problem in the United States because we just switched our supply lines. We could no longer depend on Iranian heroin because we couldn't depend on these screwy Islamic fundamentalists, so we just turned toward all of these company assets in Honduras and Ecuador and Colombia. Very, very cynical. You know, it's only been 120 years since the so-called Opium Wars. Very few people know what the Opium Wars, what was the issue in the Opium Wars. Well, it turns out the British government wanted to deal opium in China, and the Chinese emperor told them to get lost. And they flipped, and they sent naval units, and they laid siege to several Chinese cities, and they forced the Chinese imperial court to agree that they could deal as much opium as they wanted on the wharves of Shanghai and Chusan. Why did the English suddenly decide that they had to go into the opium business? They're stealth. That's stealth. Every drug problem can usually be traced to a previous drug problem. The British East India Company spent a huge amount of time building up a world tea trade. And the Chinese were very smart. They sold tea in the ports of China to the English, but for 250 years they would never let the English see how the tea was grown or what it was exactly. What the English bought were bale tea, and it was all of Europe was addicted to a drug that nobody knew exactly where it came from or what it was. Well, then eventually the secret was lost, stolen. Let's be frank, friends. Eventually the secret was stolen, wrenched from the hands of the Chinese, and the English began furiously growing tea in Ceylon. Although, what agriculture always does, they produced too much tea, and they blew the market, the bottom out of the tea trade. So here's the British East India Company with this huge infrastructure, coaling stations all around the world, and a vast fleet of tea ships, and nobody can sell tea and make any money. So then they said, well, let's put Indians to work in Goa and we'll grow opium. He said, well, but opium, isn't that a drug? That's not a good thing to do. And he said, well, no, we're not going to sell it in England. That's not the plan. We'll sell it in China. You know, there are more people in China and they're not English, so let's let them have it. So that's why the tea traders became opium traders, and that's why the Opium Wars were fought, was to protect English mercantile capitalism from the effects of the collapse of the tea trade. The Japanese, when they invaded Manchuria in the Second World War, they immediately began producing heroin and opium in vast amounts, not then as an economic strategy, but as a strategy to break the will of the Chinese population by encouraging addiction. And there was vast amounts of opium addiction. If any of you saw The Last Emperor of China, you recall that his mistress was severely addicted to opium, and it depicted it in a number of scenes. So governments have very cynically manipulated drugs so that the drugs which make it possible for capitalism to function are cheap and freely available, and the drugs which erode dominator values or cause people to question their situation are savagely suppressed.
It seems like the dominator will always be in control because the psychedelic user will have a decreased ego.
You mean, how can we win if we're taking psychedelics? I think you just put me out of business. That's it, folks. I'm slightly caught out on that. I think that what we have to say is that we must win by example. You know, the I Ching says you must never confront evil directly, because then it learns how to defend itself. The hippies were certainly no threat to the government as a military force, but as an example, as a model for others to follow, I think they scared them to death. They were probably very happy to see them all turn into weathermen and begin hurling Molotov cocktails. That they understood.
Existing apparatus conflict.
Right, they could relate to that, but flowers in the barrels of their guns spelled ruin and defeat, and they knew it.
There was an article in the Chronicle the other day about nonviolent warfare. The idea of, what drugs or gases or whatever that'll just temporarily disable people to prevent physical aggression in war. And so I think that's a step forward in a way.
I think it's a step forward, although it was hatched by the military-industrial complex in a desperate effort to keep the money flowing. They're so frantic, they're willing to cut a deal at this point. A kinder, gentler warfare is what we're talking about here. Yeah.
So back to basics, in terms of, that it dissolves the ego and it shows you the true size of the world, and it's a humbling experience, and it's a religious experience, really, is no longer, just like he was saying, that's not so. So isn't the basic question how to get to that without using the machinery?
You mean without using the drugs?
Yes. Isn't that the basic question? It's, you can tell them all to stick it up wherever, and you go on and you continue your religious, humbling, ego-dissolving experiences without...
Well, the problem there is it possible? Is it possible to attain these states any way other than with drugs? And this is usually comes around at some point in these weekends as a bone of contention, because we live in a society that offers an endless smorgasbord of non-pharmacological forms of spiritual advancement. There's first of all the orthodox forms of religiosity. You can study the Torah, you can study Christian theology, or you can be a holotropic breather, or you can, it's endless, this stuff. I am very lumpen, and this is where I feel myself to be the most crude among us, because none of this stuff works for me. And in my darker moments, I even say it doesn't work for anybody. But I always get there's always somebody who assures me that it happens for them naturally. And I just, lucky for you, you're saving a pile of money. The rest of us are going to spend our whole lives trying to get to it. But basically, I'm very skeptical. And then the other problem is, if you don't do it with drugs, it seems like there's always some weird beard personality in the picture. Babaji or Shri Muckaround Hamarubi or Lama so-and-so or Sister somebody. And these people are inevitably pathological. Wouldn't you be if you were Sister somebody? And I think drugs are much safer than gurus. Gurus are... It's part of this thing. We don't want to take responsibility for ourselves. And I guess, I'm loathed for saying this, because I just blow the whistle on all these people who have very good livings and are surrounded by adoring fans. And people are perverse. And by people, I include myself in that. People are perverse. And one of the things they like to do, you see, is they like to surrender if it's safe. And so here you have two choices. You can take this plant drug, which is in use among the witch doctors of the Amazon, and about which there are all these extravagant and horrifying stories, and maybe you'll go mad, and maybe you'll be enlightened, and maybe you'll see God, or maybe you'll be devoured by a giant snake. You can choose that path. Or you can just sweep up around the ashram for 10 or 15 years and make sure that Babaji always has a bowl of brown rice at his elbow, and he will lift you up and do the thing. And people say, well, I think I'll go with Babaji. I don't want to. And what it is it's a fear of surrender. And
I hear you. And my concern is the original values are the values about doing it, as a people. I don't know. It's very individualistic. I'm not sure that I can get to where I got to without the drugs. But I have felt certain experiences, that are not exactly like that, but they were meaningful. And I'm not sure at this point. I mean, I'm toying with the idea, but I'm not sure that I'm willing to play the game because it's become the game, and not partake in it as a religious experience, as a group, as a kinder, gentler. It's hard because because I certainly don't want to follow Baba whatever, and that's not my game either. But and without judgment, absolutely. I'm just really trying to understand or find the way that the initial values and the initial humbling could be found. And in terms of addiction, which I dealt with in terms of pot, and a relatively powerful addiction for me it was. I began to use it as a non-religious experience. It was a deadening experience for me. It was isolating experience. This world feels like shit. So and it served me.
That's an accurate perception.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
There are options other than the two
it
that.
will again, I'm sure, serve me.
I mean,
I'm trying to find
something.
One of the questions that's worth talking about, because I've never made up my mind about this, is the psychedelics are always cast as an option in the spiritual quest. You can study yoga or meditation, or you can take drugs, or you can do good works like Mother Teresa or something like that. I've never been absolutely certain that psychedelics have anything whatsoever to do with the spiritual quest. If we define the spiritual quest as that which impels you to the moral life, then I don't really see, I don't understand. I certainly have taken a lot of psychedelics. I certainly am no moral exemplar, nor have I ever felt pressure to be one while on a psychedelic trip. The mushroom has never said to me, as a leader of the people, you should be a better person. Inevitably, these spiritual hierophanies tend toward a vocabulary of unity and light and completion. And that's not the vocabulary that I would apply to the psychedelic experience. The psychedelic experience is weirder than that. It's about self-transforming elf machines from hyperspace kicking down your front door and rotating all 4 tires on your after-death vehicle and also checking the radiator. Is that a spiritual experience? Hell, who knows what kind of an experience it is.
Use psychedelic in a very limited sense to refer to the triplet psychedelics. There are, of course, course, many psychedelics where you don't have elements running around.
Well, I call those things psychoactive, but you're right. You're right. They're psychoactive. See, here's the thing. I mean, there's a series of declensions here. There's psychedelic, there's psychoactive, and there's altered states. There are hundreds and hundreds of altered states, most non-drug. And then there are altered states of consciousness which are drug-induced. I can feel an aspirin hit. I mean, I actually can feel the shift in my reality from 2 buffered aspirin. And then, of course, there's caffeine stimulation and downers and all of these things. None of this is psychedelic in the ordinary sense. And the psychedelic experience for me is this very narrowly defined thing where you see visions. Hallucinations aren't even sufficient, because there are all kinds of hallucinations, you know, moving grids of color and little swimming things, and then you get the mice dancing in rows and the little candies floating by, and this, you can't build a pyramid out of that kind of stuff. But the real vision is a very mysterious thing, impossible by rationalist standards, and we all are rationalist enough that even in confrontation with it, we know that it's miraculous. So a thing worth thinking about and worth talking about this weekend is whether or not the psychedelics are in fact part of what is ordinarily thought of as the spiritual quest or the quest for religious understanding. There are people who take psychedelics who don't have an iota of spirituality in them. If you're interested, there's a very interesting book called Shamanism, Colonialism, and the Wild Man by Michael Taussig. Michael Taussig, I dare say, would be very uncomfortable in this room. He would dismiss us all as fruits and flakes because he's a Marxist labor organizer. There is no vertical gain in this guy's worldview. And yet, he's taken more ayahuasca probably than anybody in this room and been loaded, thoroughly loaded. So it's very interesting to read his book and garner his conclusions. He sees it in an entirely different way. I think it is a way to access insight, but it doesn't seem to support the Neoplatonic hierarchy of ascending light and space that is the assumption of Western religion. There's no white light at the end of the tunnel in psilocybin. Instead, you know, there's the alien edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Maybe that's a spiritually enlightening thing to encounter, or maybe not. Yeah. LSD fits. LSD is more classically psychoanalytic, number one, and number two, supportive of the metaphors of Western religiosity. It does move you toward the dissolving whiteness, the oneness with the unspeakable of Meister Eckhart and that crowd.
In the Harvard experiments, originally Cleary and Alport, they used psilocybin with these.
Well, but they put them in a chapel on Good Friday. Well, so the set and setting then highly determined the trip. Yeah. Good man, over here.
A couple times during the morning, and actually once last night, the subject of the topic of addiction came up, and I've heard a number of people say psychedelics can be addictive, and I believe that maybe that could possibly be true. I don't know it to be true, but could be possibly true in lighter doses. But in a strong psychedelic, full-blown experience, I don't see how it possibly could be addictive. And moving down that same line of thought, if that's the case, then isn't it? I mean, aren't we really kind of using the wrong word if we're not making a distinction between drugs and psychedelics?
Well, you have to make a distinction between physiological and psychological addiction. Most addictions are psychological. Addiction to eggs in the morning, addiction to having your newspaper on time, and addiction to, the controversial one, I think, is cannabis. Is it or is it not addicting? And I've had occasion to fiddle with this in the course of my life, and I think the answer is fairly complicated. I think the answer is yes, sometimes, or no, but sometimes yes. A year or so ago, I was in therapy and had a lot of problems with my relationship and so forth. And I was in therapy with this woman who I really respected a lot, and she seemed very bright. But strangely enough, she knew almost nothing about drugs. And it was a weird thing for me to have a therapist like that. And she kept coming back to this thing about cannabis. And she'd say, well, now, how many times a day do you get stoned? I said, well, 10 or a dozen. I said, well, and how many years have you been doing this? Say, 25. She said, well, you must be completely lost in this. And it became an issue in the therapy. So finally I said to her, I'll quit. I'll just quit. Because the therapy, I quit. I said, because I am convinced this isn't a problem, and it will be useful for you to see that someone with this kind of a history of cannabis use doesn't have a problem quitting. And I did quit, and I had absolutely no problem with it, which amazed me. I had been whistling past the graveyard when I made these brave statements. It was no problem whatsoever. But at other times in my life, when I've tried to quit, it's been a real tussle of some sort. And I think that the setting has a great deal to do. I think we're now fairly addicted to the concept of addiction. As the evolution of drug attitudes has progressed, let's take heroin, for example. In the 19th century, the user of opiates was called the drug fiend. You were a fiend. This means the concept that is being evoked here is of demonic possession. A junkie has a monkey on his back. That's another fiend image. You're possessed. You can't stop yourself. In the 20th century, addiction is viewed as a disease. And once you view addiction as a disease, you've totally released yourself from responsibility to do anything about it. After all, if you have multiple sclerosis, we don't stigmatize you as morally lax and unable to discipline yourself. So if you have the disease of morphine addiction, it's not your fault. It just sort of happened to you, like the flu or something. Well, I think this makes it almost impossible to begin any kind of rational program of cure, because you just say, doctor, fix me. There's something wrong with me.
I'm talking about those as like 5 grams of mushrooms or 40 milligrams of DMT. I mean, how often can you do that?
Oh, no, I think that's a complete red herring. Nobody can be addicted to psychedelics, only if they use them as though it were another drug. In other words, it's possible to take mini doses of LSD, and what you are is you're a speedhead. This is not what LSD does. This is what methamphetamine does. All psychedelics in low doses appear to be the same drug. Mescaline, LSD, psilocybin, harmine, not DMT, because there is no such thing as a little bit, it appears. But it's only when you take large doses, effective doses, I don't mean heroic doses, but when you take effective doses, then the differences immediately emerge. I don't know. I think addiction is a disempowering concept. I notice there seems to be a backlash building. It's now okay to publicly ridicule 12-step programs, and you're not just denounced as a mad dog of some sort, because people have seen through it, and people now announce their addiction to everything at the bat of an eye.
There seems to be a movement amongst AA, that particular 12-step program, that I've heard when I know people are doing it, that are working with psychedelics. I mean, they're not drinking alcohol, but they're working with psychedelics. And there seems to be, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but it's fairly widespread.
Oh, well, I think that people who are very serious about AA are usually pretty open about agreeing to the power of psychedelics. I mean, I know that in the AA program you're supposed to be totally clean and not do anything, but I've had people who were major figures in AA tell me, you're exactly right on. This is the right thing. In the early 60s, when LSD was first being explored by psychiatrists, they began giving it to people, chronic alcoholics, and they were getting close to 80% cure of chronic alcoholism with a single exposure to LSD. Well, that doesn't mean that LSD is the magic bullet for alcoholism. That would be hard to feature. What it means is that if you take LSD, you are forced to examine the dynamics of your life, and if you notice that you're killing yourself, you will be inspired to stop doing whatever you're doing. I mean, it can be alcohol, it can be hard drugs, it can be that you're mean to your wife and children, it can be that you're chiseling your business partner, and on the LSD you say, hey, that's not a smart thing to do, I shouldn't do that. And then you can usually muster the energy to stop. No, the paradox of our society and its cockamamie attitude toward drugs, the most dangerous drugs, we legalize. The drugs that do the most social harm, we create mega industries out of them. And then we demonize everybody else's drugs. And this is a situation that has been exacerbated since the middle of the 19th century. You see, we forget that all of this information about drugs has arrived in Western civilization only in the last 100 to 120 years. In the same revolution in thinking that brings Darwin's theory of evolution and an awareness of, let's call it, the relativism of culture. Suddenly we realize that there are Shinto and Zen and shamanism and Hinduism and all of these things. Also brought the arrival in Western culture of the information about extremely exotic drug habits or drug usages that were very localized until very recently. I mean, ayahuasca is a good example. In our lifetime, ayahuasca has gone from being the subject of William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg's book, The Yahé Letters, where they actually had to make the equivalent of a spiritual pilgrimage to South America to sort through this. It's gone from that to Brazilian missionaries of these ayahuasca religions setting up camp in Malibu and Boston and Berkeley and turning people on. Other drugs, well, psilocybin, an even more dramatic example. In 1953, The use of psilocybin was restricted to certain Mazatecan Indian tribes in central Mexico, thanks to the promulgation of home methods of cultivation. Now it's a standard item on the psychedelic menu of most high-tech industrial cultures. So we haven't really had time to assimilate all this and make sense of it. Addiction is simply what's the word? A shibboleth? Is that the word? You know, it's a false boogeyman. I mean, our real addictions are to status, property, money, and power over others. I mean, if you got that under control, I think people's relationship to opiates would be a minor part of the agenda. But we love to demonize the exotic and to pat ourselves on the back. I mean, alcohol culture, cultures that tolerate and encourage alcohol are just besotted with alcohol. It touches every aspect of life. I mean, for instance, you know, there are certain subcultures that I think are more besotted than others. Academe is just a nightmare of alcoholic abuse and misbehavior and carrying on of the most bestial and depressing sort. And, you know, these are the carriers of the eggs. They're carrying the basket in which the eggs of culture have been hidden. So, did that get it? Did it get something?
Find me one more time that about academia.
That academic culture runs very heavily on alcohol. If you've ever been to faculty parties, and or you know, do you think you could advance to full professor in the English department at Cal and Stanford if you were a teetotaler? I don't think so. I think you would be suspect as a pariah, not one of the boys, not a team player, you know. So a lot of hard drinking goes on in those situations. Politics, incredible. You know, Washington, if you want to go to a hard drinking town, you know, these guys that stumble across the front page of our newspaper are just the ones who get caught. I mean, everybody is juicing it real strong inside the Beltway. So, yeah, having a belt inside the Beltway.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, the CBS reporter Connie Chung, they were talking about when they brought up about somebody's mistress and all that, you know, one of the presidential candidates, and she said, if you had to eliminate everybody who had sexual problems or drinking problems in Washington, about 10% would qualify to run for anything.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, we now are fixated on people's sexual peccadillos in politics, but imagine if getting sloppily drunk made you ineligible for high public office. I mean, don't forget, having one toke of marijuana 20 years in the past disqualifies you from the Supreme Court. You can't get near it. I mean, you're just a monster of vice. And yet, a clown like Clarence Thomas, I hope you all read the Rolling Stone encounter between Clarence Thomas and Hunter S. Thompson. Oh, it's classic. It's classic. The guy was such a beast that he frightened Hunter Thompson with his drug abuse, treatment of women, and antics. Anyway, anything else left over from this morning?
It talks about institutions being rife with alcohol, almost alcohol cultures. It seems that business is the one place that seems to be changing. That, you know, that it doesn't really work as well, and that the hierarchical structures do not fit against what the real day-to-day needs are. You don't have an underlying funded environment like government or universities where you live or die, and that these new models are taking hold, and that businesses are trying to transform themselves into learning organizations and keeping up with change, and are more open than I've ever remember being before.
Well, probably because they're very aware of the bottom line, and they're actually seeing the cost of alcoholism in their workforce, whereas you point out, government and academe, these are places where you feed at the trough of public monies in some sense. I mean, if you're a tenured professor, I don't know what kind of a drunk you would have to be turned into in order to get thrown out of a university. I mean, short of serial murder, they don't punish you for anything once you have tenure. Somebody had something over here?
I just wondered, segue completely, if you'd seen it play in the fields of the Lord.
I actually had such an emotional stake in that movie that I listened to Lou Carlino, who wanted to direct it, and I wanted to be the expert, the consultant, that I didn't go see it because he said they ruined it. That it was just botched. If you've read the book, have you read the book? The book is one of the most wonderful, it is, I would say, the most wonderful piece of fiction ever written about the Amazon. And without naming names, I understand these actors did a terrible job. And Babenko, who directed it, they thought they were so smart to get a third world director. But Victor Babenko had never been to the jungle. He's a Rio de Janeiro boy. Just because he did Kiss of the Spider Woman, that didn't set him up for this at all. What Lou said to me was, he said there was no sweat, there were no bugs, there was no grime. What kind of an Amazon picture is this?
And their portrayal of his ayahuasca experience was just pathetic.
I heard it was wide of the mark. I mean, I hope it wasn't wonderful for you, because you're... Well, there you see, that's what makes poetry.
You probably ought to go see it.
No, I think I probably should go see it. Well, now that my initial disappointment has...
It's Hollywood. It's not... maybe throw out the idea that there should be any realism or truth in it. But what it did, I thought, personally, was that at least it did give people, the audience, a somewhat more vivid and somewhat more accurate picture of this kind of tribal reality than anything I know of that's ever been in a Hollywood movie.
Well, how about John Borman's picture, The Emerald Forest?
Yeah.
Although that
is a better picture of this situation.
More authentic.
More authentic, yes.
I didn't see at play, so I can't say. But I thought John did a good job with that, considering he had never had a psychedelic experience at that point. He was feeling by theory, and he got pretty close to it. There have been attempts in Hollywood to deal with this theme, most of them quite unhappy. What was that awful thing with Richard Chambers? Altered States.
There's one about the early ceremonies coming out with Val Kilmer, Spirit Fire.
Oh yeah, I saw the previous one.
Uh-huh. Well, we want to encourage them. I mean, keep trying, folks. They may get it sooner or later, but it's hard for them to handle this kind of thing because it's very elusive, I mean, showing an internalized world, and especially, one that is different from person to person is very, very tricky. Anything else?
One last comment about the alcoholism and LSD thing. I was at UCLA in the late 50s, early 60s when Sidney Cohen was doing that research. And I don't think the statistics were quite as high as you mentioned. But if they worked at all, they say that behind every alcoholic is a spiritual seeker, gone awry. And And if LSD worked at all, it might be because of the numinous state that it produced, which is what the alcoholic was really, seeking or wanting to touch.
Well, also, there's a lot of contextualizing of drug experiences. For instance, the Chinese school of poetry surrounding Li Po, who was a Tang Dynasty poet, it was alcohol. Alcohol was their drug of transcendence. And these groups of poets would get together and they would drink heavily, and then they would declaim poetry, and scribes would write it down, and we inherit this as a corpus of sublime artistic outpouring. And yet it was created in an environment which we identify with a very low consciousness state. It is a contextualized thing, definitely. So we finished with that for the moment? We can always go back. Well, I thought I sort of try to divide these things into different domains of concern, and I thought of the morning as sort of the sociological, anthropological, historical shtick. And then I thought maybe what we should do this afternoon, mainly because it's my favorite part, is to talk about the content of these experiences. Not only because it's fun, but because one of the things I've discovered in trying to wage this kind of career is because we are talking about something invisible and an experience, and because we can't all drop here in this room and compare notes, it's often hard to get everybody to the same starting gate. People have entirely different notions of what you actually mean when you say a psychedelic experience. Most people, even straight people, have had what they call a drug experience. They either remember the time they drank a whole bottle of cough syrup, or the time that, they went in for minor surgery and were given an anesthetic, or the time they had root canal work, and everybody eventually, it's hard to live a life where you don't eventually get your mind altered. This does not set you up for the psychedelic experience, and because there's no consensus about this, it's worthwhile talking about the gradations and what is really possible. At the broadest level, you have what are called altered states. And altered states are any state different from the state you were just in. So if you have a double espresso, you enter an altered state. If you climb a mountain in 3 minutes, you have an altered state. If you dive into cold water, altered state. And there are an infinitude of these altered states. I mean, if states didn't alter, life would be pretty boring. The moment-to-moment experience of being is an experience of altering states. I'm horny, I'm sleepy, I'm pissed off. These are all altered states. Then as you close in through the concentric circle of this particular mandala, you come to psychoactive, the impact of psychoactive drugs. Now we've eliminated jumping into cold water, climbing mountains. Now we're firmly in the domain of drugs, substances of some sort, and it includes foods. I mean, you all know what an MSG flush is like. Well, or do you? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Chinese restaurant syndrome? Okay, well that's a metabolite, a monosodium glutamate, being taken in excess amount and causing an altered state. It's a kind of you could think of it as a drug. anything which changes your mind can be abused as a drug. Jalapeno peppers are in many shamanic societies. People eat huge amounts of jalapeno peppers and identify the feeling as power. And they say, I am building my inner heat so that I can cure. You know, it's a very conscious kind of thing. Well, then there are the more traditional psychoactive states of tranquility brought on by tranquilizers, Halcyon, Valium, you know, there's a million of these things and they come and go, Prozac, or states of agitation, methadone, benzodrine, dexedrine, amphetamine, white sugar, caffeine, theobromine, the active agent in sugar, in cocoa and chocolate. Each one of these things pushes you into a different state, which is largely emotive and rooted in the body. But when you get to before we talk about the psychedelics, then there are drugs which are mental drugs, which I don't consider psychedelic. And my definition of psychedelic is tighter than most people's. For instance, you may know about Datura. Datura is Jimson weed and these ornamental plants with the large white bell-like flowers. Well, if you make a tea out of the leaves, root, flowers, or seed of that plant, it will turn you every way but loose. I mean, it is a completely disorienting, freaky kind of experience with loss of memory, confusion of sequence, delusion of reference, amnesia, projective imagining, so forth and so on. To my mind, it is not a psychedelic state. I call it a deliriant or a confusant. I remember I usually end up telling this story. What put me off Datura was years ago when I lived in Nepal. I had this English friend, and we experimented with all kinds of drugs. And one day I was in the market buying potatoes and tomatoes, the only two things you could get in Bodna at that time. And I encountered this guy, and we started just exchanging the news of the day. And in the course of the conversation, I became aware that he thought I was visiting him in his apartment. He was so lost in this stuff that he didn't know we were out in the street, in the market. He thought I had come by his rooms. Well, I just said, that's too stoned. Nobody needs to be that twisted around. I mean, you literally do not know what is happening. To my mind, the psychedelics can be chemically defined, with very few exceptions, as indoles. Now, the only exception to this is mescaline. Mescaline is not an indole. It's a phenylethylamine, or some people consider it a cyclicized amphetamine, which is a phenylethylamine. I am not fond of mescaline. It seems to me that to get to psychedelic levels with it, you have to take so much that you're fairly rattled. It's hard on you, and it's hard on you the next day. And many people who are great devotees of peyote, when you question them very closely, it isn't the quality of the visions. It's some more murky thing. It's that they like hanging out with Native Americans, they like drumming all night, they love ceremonies, they like going to the Southwest, but it's not the quality of the visions. Not that mescaline can't do that. It certainly can. If you read these early researchers like Heinrich Kluwer, S. Weir Mitchell, Havelock Ellis, I mean, these are wonderful descriptions of full-on psychedelic states, but they were using pure mescaline, you know, and close to 1 gram a throw, which is a lot. Most people, when they take pure mescaline, if you actually measure the amount that they're taking well under what is clinically considered the effective dose. If you look in the Merck manual or the PDR, the clinically recommended dose of pure mescaline is 750 milligrams, 3/4 of a gram of alkaloid. Very few people actually take that, and this brings us to one of the issues around psychedelics. There are a lot of wannabe experts running around who didn't take enough, because you have to take a lot, not a lot, but you have to take a frightening amount to get into what it's really about. People who have taken 50 gamma of LSD or 100 gamma of LSD or 2 grams of mushrooms or something like that, they are not qualified to hold forth on the nature of the psychedelic experience, because those doses don't deliver it to you. What they deliver is the periphery of the psychedelic experience, accelerated thought processes, a kind of depth and richness to cognition that is unfamiliar, an ability to analyze situations from unusual perspectives or to reach unexpected conclusions. But I found this reluctance to come to grips with the full psychedelic experience, even among Amazonian shaman. I mean, people are reluctant to go the full distance. We were with shamans at one point in Peru, ayahuasca shamans, and I was aware of an admixture plant that was stronger than the admixture plant that they were using. And I kept asking this guy, what about so-and-so? Why don't we do that? And at first, all he would say was that it's not for Christians, which was strange because he always knocked Christians. So I didn't, but I kept pressing. And finally, he said, we just don't do it that way. And I said, why not? And he said, because it's mal y bizarro, you know? And I said, isn't that what we're shooting for? Apparently not. A curing shaman wants to be empowered to cure. He doesn't conceive of himself as a Magellan of the phenomenological realm who's setting out to circumnavigate the mental universe in an evening. And then of the psychedelics, they deliver differing levels of this. And then what you always have to bear in mind when you listen to me talk about this is there are physiological differences among people. You know, in the same way that person A can detect a compound X at 1 part in 10,000, but person B cannot detect the same compound unless it's there in, 1,000 parts in 10,000. We are genetically different in this area of drug receptors. And it's even possible, although it is also permissive of a kind of crypto-fascism, to believe that there are shamanic lines, families, races even, that are more or less inclined to this. The Irish are always singled out as special offenders in this area. The stereotype of the Irish is that they have a peculiarly intense relationship to intoxication and to little people in a nearby but invisible world. I don't put a lot of credence to this, but it's very hard for me to tell because I can only sample myself, and I happen to be Irish, although leavened with Sicilian genes to keep it from getting out of hand. So what you really have to do when you start exploring psychedelics is to try and figure out, what's the center of the mandala? What are people talking about? What is it when you arrive on the money? And to my mind, the compound that is most interesting for doing that is DMT. DMT is the most interesting in some ways of the psychedelics because more issues are raised by it than any other. Such issues as, I'll just run over some of them so you get a feeling for it. DMT is the strongest hallucinogen there is. If it's possible to get more loaded than that, I don't want to know about it. And I say so when I'm there. I say, my God, if you can get more loaded than this, keep it away from me. So that's it. It's the strongest. It's also the shortest acting. DMT, when smoked, in most people, is return you to normal in under 10 minutes. Under 10 minutes. Now, this is interesting because people who think there's nothing to this, who should actually invest the 10 minutes to find out what's, a 10-minute DMT trip is worth 20 years of academic pharmacology, art history, psychology, and all this other malarkey. Because then you just say, okay, I got it. Another very interesting thing about DMT is it occurs naturally in the human brain. Well, now what's going on here? He's saying the strongest drug, the fastest drug, is the most natural drug. It means that, you don't have to sail off into 3-hydroxy-4-pyridyl N-methyl-marubishtik or something like that to get into the exotic realms. No, a human metabolite, which takes only 10 minutes to undergo its entire exfoliation and quenching, is the strongest of all. Well, then what is it? What does strong mean? What is a strong psychedelic? It's highly personal. Every psychedelic trip is. But what happens on DMT for a large number of people, we don't have any statistics, but it is a completely confounding experience. You may have had the expectation, you might think if you had never had a psychedelic experience, that it sort of begins like the Bach B minor fugue and goes from there as you rise into the realms of light and union with the deity or something like that. That's not what happens on DMT. What happens on DMT I referred to this morning. A troop of elves smashes down your front door and rotates and balances the wheels on the after-death vehicle, present you with the bill, and then depart. And it's completely paradigm-shattering. Union with the white light you could handle. An invasion of your apartment by jeweled self-dribbling basketballs from hyperspace that are speaking in demotic Greek is not something that you anticipated and could handle. Sometimes people say, is DMT dangerous? It sounds so crazy. Is it dangerous? The answer is only if you fear death by astonishment. Remember how you laughed when this possibility was raised, and a moment will come that will wipe the smile right off your face. And this death by astonishment thing, well, one thing about it, I mean, let me say a little bit more about it. One thing that endears DMT to me is I like to say it doesn't affect your mind. It doesn't seem to affect your mind. In other words, you don't change under the influence of DMT. You don't become a kinder, gentler person. You don't sink into, you know, a line of drool from one corner of your mouth as you sit there twitching. You don't change. What happens is the world is completely replaced. Instantly, 100%, it's all gone. And what is put in its place, not one iota of what is put in its place was taken from this world. So it's a 100% reality channel switch. They don't even retain three-dimensional space and linear time. It's not like you go to an exotic place, Morocco or New Guinea. It's like reality is swapped out for something else. And when you try to say what it is, you realize that language has evolved in this world, and it can serve no other. It takes years of practice. So what you're looking at is literally the unspeakable. The indescribable falls into your lap. And when you try, you're loaded, right? You're there, and you're trying to explain to yourself what's happening. And so this is like you try to pour water over the transdimensional objects in front of you, the water of language, and it just beads up and flows off like water off a duck's back. You cannot say what's there. And I've spent, 25 years fiddling with this. It's become the compass of my inspiration, trying to say what is on the other side of that boundary. Just 2 large tokes away at any given time is this non-Euclidean, non-Newtonian, irrational, un-Englishable place. But it's not smooth and empty and clear. That's not what gives it its indescribability. What gives it its indescribability is its utter weirdness, its alienness, its power to astonish. What happens to me when I smoke DMT is there's a kind of a going toward it. There's a sequela of events which lead to the antechamber of the mystery. I mean, you take a toke, you feel strange. Your whole body feels odd. You take a second toke, all the oxygen seems to have been pumped out of the room. Everything jumps into clarity. It's that visual acuity thing. You take a third toke if you're able, and then you lay back and you see this thing which looks like a rose or a chrysanthemum, this orange spinning flower-like thing. It takes it about 15 seconds to form, and it's like a membrane. And then you break through it. You break through it, and then you're in this place. And there's an enormous cheer which goes up as you pass through this membrane. Some of you may know the Pink Floyd song about how the gnomes have learned a new way to say hooray. They're waiting. And you burst in to this place, and you're saying, geez, this stuff is really speedy. I mean, that's like describing a space shuttle launching as noisy, You say, this stuff is, and you say, am I all right? Am I all right? That's the first question. And so then you run your mind around the track, and you say, heartbeat, normal, yeah, normal. Heartbeat, normal. Pulse, normal. Breathing, breathe, yes. But what's right here, and from here out is this thing, which no matter how much science fiction you've done, no matter how much William Burroughs you've read, no matter how much time you've spent in the company of the weird, the bizarre, the outre, and the peculiar, you weren't ready. And it's completely real. It's in a way more real than the contents of ordinary reality, because see how the shadows here are muted and there's a lot of transitional zones from one color to another and so forth. This isn't like that. This is crystalline, clear, solid. You can see the light reflected in the depths of these objects, and everything is very brightly colored, and everything is moving very, very rapidly. And there are entities there. It's not about calling them up or the whisperings of them. No, they're in your face. And they're right here, and they're worse than in your face, because what they do is they jump into your chest, and then they jump out. And so you're like this. And you have to keep saying, keep breathing, don't freak out, pay attention, and the entities speak to you. And they speak both in English and another way, which we'll get to in a minute. But in English, what they say is, do not give way to wonder. Hang on. Don't just go gaga with disbelief. Pay attention. Pay attention. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to show you something. They are very aware of the fleeting nature of this encounter. And they say, don't just spiral off into amazement and start raving about God and all that. Forget that. Pay attention to what we're doing. And then what they're doing is they're dancing around, they're jumping around, they're emerging explicitly out of the background, bounding toward you, jumping into your chest, bounding away, and they make offerings. And they love you. That's the other thing. They say this. They say, we love you. You come so rarely. And, here you are, welcome. And then they make these offerings. And the offerings are objects of some sort. And now remember, you are not changed. You're exactly the person you were a few minutes before.